Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
I used to believe love meant trust, but the night I found Sophie whispering into her phone, her voice low, secretive I knew. Late meetings, distant eyes, the scent of cologne that wasn't mine. Then came the receipts, the hushed conversations with Oliver Spencer, the way she said my name like a problem to be solved. They planned everything, my death, my disappearance, my erasure, but they underestimated me. Now Oliver's empire is crumbling. Sophie? She's running. She thought she could trade me for a paycheck. Thought I'd go quietly. She'll soon learn. A man trained to survive doesn't die easy. And payback? It's already begun. Before we begin, let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale. I remember the smell of freshly cut lumber that day, crisp pine mixed with the gritty scent of sawdust. It was a Monday afternoon, and my crew and I had just finished framing a single-story addition for a client across town. There's something comforting about routine, especially when you've lived with chaos in your past. So as I loaded up the last of my tools into my old truck, I was grateful for the normalcy of it all. My name is Andrew Willard, and these days I work construction. It's a far cry from the specialized world I used to inhabit, but I like it that way. It keeps me grounded, helps me sleep at night. Nobody asks too many questions, and I don't volunteer much either. When I got home around 5:30 p.m., the sky was streaked with pale orange. Our house, modest but cozy, sits on a quiet street in a suburban neighborhood. I spotted Sophie's car in the driveway. She'd arrived earlier than usual. Normally, she worked late showing properties to clients or meeting her boss, Oliver Spencer, for networking events. Sophie is a real estate agent, one of the more successful ones in her firm. I used to be so proud whenever she'd tell me about a new listing she closed or a challenging client she finally won over. Lately, though, I've noticed she hasn't been sharing much of anything. I stepped inside and called out, "Honey, I'm home!" just like in those old sitcoms. No answer. Instead, I heard hushed chatter from upstairs. Figuring she was on the phone, I tried not to intrude. Toby, our golden-brown mutt, lumbered over, tail swaying. I knelt to give him a scratch behind the ears. "Good boy," I whispered. He wagged his tail in that slow, deliberate way that always melted my stress away. Toby's been with us for a few years now. We adopted him from a local shelter. He's a bit older and has a limp in his hind leg. But he's loyal and calm. Sophie used to love doting on him, buying him treats and fancy collars. Lately, she hardly notices him at all. I wandered into the kitchen to rinse off my hands, letting the warm water wash away the grime from the job site. Half listening to the muffled voice upstairs, I started making a mental checklist of what I needed for dinner. We had leftover roast chicken, some salad fixings. That would do. Except I realized Sophie might have other plans. She'd been going out more often, sometimes with short notice. She'd say she was meeting clients, but the stories weren't as consistent as they used to be. A minute later, she came down, phone still in her hand. She looked mildly startled to see me standing there. "Oh," she said, slipping the phone into her back pocket. "You're home early." "I guess so," I replied with a small smile. Had fewer tasks than expected at the site. "Everything okay?" She nodded quickly, though her eyes darted away. "Just a work call. You know, dealing with a client who's changed their mind about a property." Her tone was rushed, not the usual cheerful explanation I'd come to expect when she talked about her work. She crossed her arms, a gesture I'd read 1,000 times in body language training back in another life. Sometimes it means discomfort, sometimes defensiveness. I tried not to pry. "All right. You want me to fix you a plate of dinner? I was thinking salad and leftover chicken." She hesitated. "Actually, I might just grab a quick bite later. I'm not that hungry right now." "Sure, no problem." I kept my tone even, casual. As she turned away, Toby waddled over, hoping for a pat. Sophie barely glanced down at him, mumbled something about needing to respond to a text, and disappeared into the living room. I stood there, letting the faucet run for a moment, aware of a quiet pang in my chest. Something felt off. The shift in her mood, in her attention to Toby, in the way her eyes seemed to hold secrets. It was like part of her was somewhere else. I tried brushing it aside while I dished up my own meal. People change, responsibilities pile up, maybe it was just stress. Real estate can be cutthroat, especially if her boss was pushing her. I told myself it was probably nothing, but that inner radar I'd developed years ago kept flickering. I couldn't quite shut it down. After dinner, I flipped on the TV in the living room. Sophie sat on the far end of the couch, legs curled beneath her, phone in hand. She was scrolling through something, looking vaguely irritated. I tried asking a couple of open-ended questions. How's that new listing you were excited about? Or any interesting developments at work? She gave me clipped one-word answers. Eventually, I got the hint and fell silent. Toby rested his head on my foot, which offered some comfort. I absent-mindedly pet his ears while the evening news droned on. Sophie got up around 8 p.m., said something about being tired, and went to bed. On a normal day, that wouldn't be strange, except Sophie wasn't the early-to-bed type. She usually had more energy, especially if we'd barely talked all evening. By the time I went upstairs, the bedroom light was off. I changed into sweatpants quietly, not wanting to wake her. Sliding into bed, I stared at the ceiling, mind turning. My thoughts went in circles. I love her, but something's happening that I can't explain. She might just need space, or maybe work's overwhelming, but that gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. At some point, I reached for my phone, thumbing through the day's messages. A couple of my buddies from the old days had texted just to check in. I realized I hadn't replied for a few weeks. I guess I'd been so focused on building a normal life that I'd let some connections fade. The overhead fan clicked softly with each rotation, and Sophie's breathing remained slow, like she was sound asleep. Eventually, the mix of exhaustion from work and the weird tension lulled me to half-consciousness. I remember drifting in and out, dreams swirling with images of an empty house, doors wide open, and no one inside. Right before I finally fell asleep for good, Toby padded into the bedroom and curled up by my side of the bed. Even though the dog's presence comforted me, I still couldn't shake the sensation of a storm brewing somewhere on the horizon. Maybe it was my past training. Once you've been taught to see details and patterns, you can't unsee them. There, in the quiet dark, I told myself, pay attention. Not in a paranoid way, but in that level-headed, strategic sense I used to have. Because if there's a storm coming, the best defense is to see it early. I inhaled, trying to ground myself, tried to remind myself of the new life I'd built. But as much as I hated to admit it, there's a certain readiness that never really leaves you. My last thought before surrendering to sleep was that tomorrow I'd look a little closer at my surroundings and at Sophie. Tuesday morning greeted me with a dull ache in my shoulders from hauling lumber the day before. Still, I forced myself up at 6, took Toby for a quick walk around the block, then hopped into the shower. Usually, Sophie's the first one up. She claims she needs extra time to do her hair, check her emails, or meditate before the day starts. But her side of the bed was still occupied, and I could hear her breathing behind the closed bedroom door. When I came downstairs, the kitchen was empty. No coffee, no cereal bowls in the sink. I half expected Sophie to pop out in her usual blazer and pencil skirt, complaining about the morning traffic she'd face on her way to the real estate office. Instead, the house was silent. Eventually, she came down around 7:30 a.m., hair still damp, dressed in an uncharacteristically casual outfit, jeans, and a shirt. She looked tired. Her eyes flicked over me, and for a split second I thought she might say something, but she just grabbed her purse and muttered, "I'm late," heading out the door without so much as a goodbye kiss. I didn't chase after her. If there's one thing I learned from my previous line of work, it's that pushing for answers too hard too soon can cause more harm than good. Instead, I jotted down a mental note. Sophie left in a rush, wearing casual clothes, said she was late. The details might seem mundane, but you never know which puzzle piece will matter later. I had a half hour before I needed to leave for my own job, so I decided to tidy up the living room. That's when I noticed Sophie's phone bill on the coffee table. Normally, we keep those statements in a drawer or pay them online. Seeing the paper copy out in the open felt off, and I'll admit, curiosity got the best of me. I glanced at the list of calls. Most were local, a couple to known clients, but a few numbers popped out longer durations. Repeated almost every evening around 11 p.m., the area code matched a different county near where Oliver's big real estate office was located. I frowned. It could be legitimate business calls, but still my gut tightened. Letting out a breath, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I needed more than a phone bill to label anything as suspicious. Still, I folded it and tucked it away in the drawer just in case. I grabbed my keys and Toby shuffled over. "Sorry, pal," I said, scratching his head. "I gotta head out. Be good, okay?" He wagged his tail, giving me that look of unconditional canine trust. That day at work was routine enough framing and drywall. My coworker, Brad, noticed I was quieter than usual. During our lunch break, he offered me half his sandwich, he always packs too much, and asked, "You good, man? You've barely said 2 words today." "I'm all right," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just a little distracted. Sophie's been off. Probably just job stress. She's dealing with a big sale or something." He shrugged. "Yeah, my wife's been moody lately, too. She's anxious about the economy, interest rates, mortgages. Could be that. Brad's a nice guy, easygoing. He's never pried into my background, and I appreciate that." "Yeah," I agreed, though I didn't elaborate. "Probably that." By the time I finished for the day, the sun was already dipping low. I took a quick detour to the hardware store for some supplies, lumber for a personal side project I'd been working on, plus a new lock for our backyard gate. The old one was rusting out. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I noticed Sophie's car was home again, lights on inside. When I walked in, she seemed startled. She was in the living room, phone in hand, poised like she'd just ended a call. Quickly, she dropped it to her side. "You're home," she said, forcing a smile. "Yeah, it's almost 7. What's for dinner?" I asked, noticing a takeout bag on the counter. She hadn't set out plates or anything. She glanced at it. "Oh, sorry. I ended up getting something for myself on the way back. I forgot to text you." "Forgot to text me?" That wasn't like Sophie at all. She used to always check in, see if I wanted something. But I nodded. "No worries," I said quietly. "I'll just heat up leftovers." We fell into an uneasy silence. Toby waddled in, hoping for a bite from the bag or at least some attention. Sophie absently patted his head, but her eyes were somewhere else. I tried to read her face, those small muscle twitches in her cheeks or around her mouth that might give away hidden stress. I saw tension, worry, definitely not just your everyday real estate anxiety. I popped open the fridge, pulling out leftover chili and sliding it into the microwave. I decided to test the waters, asking, "How's business at the office? Oliver keep you busy?" Sophie froze for half a second before responding, "It's fine. We've got a couple of big listings coming up, so it's a lot." She gave a tight shrug. "Why do you ask?" I kept my tone casual. "Just curious. You seem preoccupied lately. Figured maybe something big was going down at work." She brushed hair behind her ear, not quite meeting my eyes. "I'm just tired, Andrew. Maybe I need a vacation or something." I forced a soft laugh, trying to reduce the tension. "Yeah, a vacation sounds good. Maybe we can plan a trip soon." She nodded but didn't respond. The microwave beeped. I stirred the chili, sneaking a glance her way. She had turned, wandering back toward the couch. The phone in her hand lit up with a notification, and I saw her press the screen quickly, as if she were hiding something. This was the second day in a row she'd cut off conversation, ended phone calls abruptly, and practically ignored Toby. My mind replayed the phone bill, those repeated calls, and the fact that she was wearing casual clothes this morning, claiming she was late. Late for what? She never offered an explanation. When I finished dinner, Sophie excused herself, saying she had to reply to some urgent emails. I caught her shooting me a strained smile, then disappearing upstairs. The seat next to me stayed empty. Toby drifted over, resting his chin on my knee. It's weird how dogs can pick up on tension. I could practically feel Toby's confusion over the shift in atmosphere. After cleaning up, I decided to go through the mail, mostly junk flyers and a real estate magazine with Sophie's name on it. Flipping through it, I recognized Oliver Spencer's smiling face in an ad for his high-end listings. He's an attractive guy, mid-40s, with an easy grin that probably makes clients trust him. I couldn't help but feel a flicker of annoyance at his photo. Sophie had mentioned him enough times in the past. Now she barely says a word about him, which almost calls more attention to the situation. I tossed the magazine onto the coffee table and turned off the living room lights. Upstairs, our bedroom door was half open. I could hear Sophie on the phone again, speaking softly. I paused at the top of the stairs, straining to catch a fragment of the conversation. Something about finalizing details, and that shouldn't be a problem. Then I heard my name, Andrew, muttered quickly, followed by a lowered voice I couldn't quite make out. I swallowed, my heart giving a tiny jolt. Carefully, I eased into the spare bedroom, which we mostly used for storage, so I wouldn't overhear too much. It felt wrong to spy on her, but at the same time, every instinct told me something was seriously off. I had to keep my cool. Eventually, she ended the call. A minute later, she walked out of the bedroom and nearly ran into me in the hallway. "God, you scared me," she yelped, gripping her phone. "What are you doing in here?" I forced a chuckle. "Looking for the extra towels. I spilled something in the bathroom." It was a weak excuse, but better than admitting I was eavesdropping. She exhaled, obviously tense. "You should probably just buy new towels then. The extras might be in the garage storage now." She brushed past me, heading downstairs without another word. I stood there, mind racing. She was definitely hiding something, and the mention of my name on that call felt like a jolt to the system. Andrew, finalizing details. That shouldn't be a problem. My gut clenched, and memories of old missions flitted through my head. Covert ops, coded language. I pushed them back down. This was my wife, for God's sake. She wouldn't be involved in anything that extreme. Would she? But the cracks in our marriage's facade were growing bigger, and I was determined to figure out what was causing them before it was too late. The rest of the week felt like I was walking through quicksand, slow, heavy, and uncertain with every step. Sophie's behavior didn't improve. In fact, it got stranger. On Wednesday, she came home well past midnight, saying she'd had a client emergency. On Thursday, she left the house super early, claiming she had to help Oliver stage a property an hour away. Yet the staging supplies she usually used were still in our garage, untouched. By Friday, my mind was juggling too many loose threads. I decided to carve out some time alone after work, just to decompress. I stopped by a small diner near the construction site, had a cup of coffee, and tried to calm the swirl of thoughts in my head. I replayed the moment she mentioned Andrew on that phone call. The phone bill, her general distance, everything felt like puzzle pieces, but I didn't have a picture on the box to guide me. I got home around 7 p.m. hoping maybe we could talk things out. But Sophie's car wasn't there, just Toby lying on the front porch. I ruffled his fur as I unlocked the door. The house was dark. A sticky note on the kitchen counter read, "Won't be back until late. Don't wait up." My chest tightened. She didn't even sign it with a heart or her name, just a hurried scribble. Toby followed me around as I switched on lights, rummaging for something to eat. The house felt bigger somehow, emptier. After I ate, I tried watching TV, flipping through channels aimlessly, but I couldn't concentrate. Eventually, I drifted upstairs, took a quick shower, and got into bed. The digital clock read 10:45 p.m. Toby curled up at the foot of the bed like a loyal guardian. I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, I was jolted awake by the soft buzz of a phone vibrating on the nightstand. It wasn't mine. Sitting up, I realized Sophie's phone was there. She must have forgotten it. The screen lit up briefly, showing the call was from OS. I stared at it, heart pounding, but the call ended after a few rings. Seconds later, the phone buzzed again, this time a text notification. I inhaled, glancing at Toby for some weird reassurance. The dog just blinked at me. My mind was half asleep, but my pulse was racing. I reached over, picking up the phone. A part of me screamed that this was a violation of her privacy, yet another part insisted I had every right to know what was happening in my own marriage. I tapped the screen. The text glowed up at me. "Oliver Spencer. Where are you? Need final confirmation Andrew. This is critical. Call me ASAP." My hand went cold. Need final confirmation regarding Andrew. I read it twice, the words blurring. A knot formed in my stomach as I set the phone back down. I felt like I'd just crossed into a territory I never wanted to enter, where my wife and her boss discussed me like I was an obstacle. Or worse. Heart thudding, I swung my legs off the bed. Toby peered up, shifting his weight. I had to calm down, think logically. If I confronted Sophie without real proof, she'd deny everything, or twist it into a story about a surprise party or some nonsense. Besides, my background taught me that knowledge is power, and showing your hand too soon can sabotage any chance you have to uncover the full truth. I reached into the back of my closet, rummaging behind a cardboard box of old clothes until my hand touched a small metal case. Inside that case was a device I'd used years ago, a compact listening transmitter and receiver. Far from the advanced stuff I once had access to, but it was enough for close-range eavesdropping. If I was truly going down this rabbit hole, I needed to gather evidence carefully. By midnight, I found myself in our cramped attic space, installing the device where the vents led down to our bedroom. Toby sat on the landing, watching me like I was insane. Part of me felt that way too, but I had to know. That text from Oliver was more than suspicious, it was ominous. Clambering down, I tested the receiver in the spare bedroom. A faint crackle. Then I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit. If Sophie brought any conversations upstairs, I'd catch them. My hands trembled slightly as I set it aside. I was crossing a line I never imagined crossing with my own wife. I didn't sleep much. My mind replayed every scenario. Blackmail, threats, maybe something to do with an unsavory real estate deal. Or, if my worst fears were correct, she might be plotting something that involved me being removed from the equation. I tried to calm myself, reminding my psyche that in the real world, not everything is a conspiracy. But that text message kept flashing in my mind. Need final confirmation, Andrew. That's not how you talk about a gift or a trivial surprise. It sounded methodical, even cold. Sophie came home at around 1:30 a.m. I only knew because Toby did his usual routine of trotting downstairs to greet anyone who enters. Half awake, I stayed quiet, listening. She took off her shoes, rustled around in the living room, possibly checking her phone. I debated stepping out, confronting her right there, but instinct told me to wait. Let her think I'm asleep. Let her slip up if she thinks no one's watching. She finally tiptoed into the bedroom. Through half-closed eyes, I saw her silhouette illuminated by the streetlight outside. She paused by the bed, probably noticing her phone on the nightstand. Then she picked it up, quietly swore under her breath. I assumed she saw Oliver's missed call and text. She exhaled, slipped out of the bedroom again, and I heard the faint murmur of her voice downstairs. Moments later, I leaned over to the nightstand, grabbed the small receiver, and turned the dial up. Nothing but static. Whatever she was saying, she was doing it downstairs, out of range. Damn. My heart hammered, frustration fueling me. I sat there, listening to the silence broken only by Toby's soft panting in the hallway. When she finally came back up, she settled into bed without a word. I feigned sleep, breathing slowly. My mind was too alert, too trained to read micro-details in her posture. She was tense, her breathing uneven, like she was upset or anxious. A faint beep from her phone indicated a text being sent or received. Who was she messaging at nearly 2 in the morning? Somewhere around 3 a.m. exhaustion finally won out. My last conscious thought was the terrifying possibility that all my instincts were correct. Sophie wasn't just having an affair. She and Oliver might be talking about me like I was a problem to be solved. At dawn, the faint orange glow seeped through the curtains. I glanced over. Sophie was still asleep, phone clutched in her hand. Toby snoozed by my feet, oblivious. I lay there, an uneasy wave of anger and betrayal flooding my chest. But I kept it inside, telling myself that my next step had to be careful, methodical. There was too much at stake: my heart, my marriage, my sense of safety. I needed more intel, and I needed it soon. Saturday rolled in with a gloomy sky threatening rain. Normally, weekends were when Sophie and I took Toby for a walk, sometimes grabbed brunch at the cafe near our house. Today, she claimed she had to show properties on the other side of town, so she was gone before 9. Toby moped around the living room, clearly bored. I ruffled his ears, gave him a treat, then set out to do something I hadn't done since my old life: start a formal surveillance setup in my own home. I'm not proud of it. I never imagined doing this to someone I loved, but the sinking feeling in my gut told me I had no other choice if I wanted the truth. That text from Oliver still haunted me. Need final confirmation, Andrew. It echoed in my mind every time I thought about Sophie's recent actions. If I was in danger, or if something illegal was happening, I had to know. I spent the morning in our attic, rummaging through an old footlocker of mine. I'd stashed it away when we first moved here. thinking I'd never need any of that gear again. Inside were a few personal items, a pair of binoculars, a disassembled small camera, a couple of mini voice recorders. This was technology from a few years back, certainly not state of heart anymore, but it would suffice for short-term eavesdropping. I tested each device carefully, making sure batteries still worked. One recorder died immediately, corroded from disuse. The other powered on with a faint LED. Good enough. Next, I grabbed the mini camera lens. It was about the size of my thumbnail, designed to be hidden easily. In my past life, I'd used these for stakeouts in foreign territories, never imagining I'd employ them within my own marriage. By noon, I had mapped out the best spots to place these devices areas where Sophie tended to have her private phone calls or might talk to Oliver in person. The living room lamp seemed like a good vantage point. There was a recessed section of the base where I could hide the lens, feeding a small cable under the rug and behind some furniture. Another potential spot was in the kitchen near the spice cabinet, because Sophie often took calls by the window, especially when she thought I wasn't around. I worked methodically, removing the base plate of the lamp, securing the lens with a dab of adhesive, threading the cable carefully so it wouldn't be visible. While I did this, Toby lay on the couch, watching me with mild curiosity. Every so often, he'd tilt his head and let out a soft whine, probably wondering why I was crawling around the floor instead of taking him on our usual Saturday walk. "Later, buddy," I muttered, giving him a quick pat. "We'll get out eventually." After setting up the camera, I hid the small receiver and DVR unit in the coat closet. If Sophie stumbled upon it, I could claim it was an old security system I was tinkering with. Still, the guilt gnawed at me. But each time that guilt arose, I pictured Oliver's name on Sophie's phone, the repeated calls, the hush-hush meetings, the text about final confirmation. My rational mind told me I was justified in wanting to protect myself. My emotional side, though, felt sick that our marriage had come to this. Shortly after 1 p.m., the sky opened up, and rain hammered the roof. I stood by the window, gazing out at the water pooling in the street. My phone buzzed with a text from a co-worker, Tim, asking if I could cover his shift on Monday. His kid was sick. I agreed, needing the distraction. Work was simpler than the mental labyrinth at home. Then, as if on cue, headlights flashed across the driveway, Sophie pulling in. She got out of the car, struggling with a folder over her head to block the rain. I darted back to the couch, pretending I'd just been lounging. Toby sprang up, wagging his tail, trotting to the door. Sophie burst inside, droplets of water sliding off her jacket. She seemed surprised to see me. "You're home? I thought you'd be out with the guys or something," she said, setting the folder on the kitchen counter. Then she looked me over, noticing my damp knees and dusty hands. "What were you doing?" I shrugged, forcing a casual tone. "Messing around with some old electronics. Thought maybe I could piece together a little security camera for the front yard. With all the packages going missing around the neighborhood, I figured it wouldn't hurt to keep watch." It was partly true there had been a few thefts reported, but it also served as a perfect cover story. Sophie raised her eyebrows, then nodded. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea." She peeled off her jacket and placed it on the back of a chair. I watched her glance at the lamp in the living room, a flicker of curiosity crossing her face. My heart did a little flip, but she didn't comment. Instead, she said, "I'm starving. Didn't get a chance to eat." "Let's order in," I suggested, trying to sound warm, like old times. "Chinese okay?" Sophie gave a half smile, which was more than I'd seen all week. "Sure, that'd be great." 15 minutes later, we were sitting at the kitchen table, sharing lo mein and crispy spring rolls. The rain outside created a soothing backdrop, and for a brief moment I tried to forget the tension that had overshadowed us. I asked about her morning showings, and she gave me a quick rundown about a couple who kept changing their budget. It sounded plausible enough, but it also felt rehearsed, like she was feeding me an edited version. I decided to keep things light, avoid pressing for details. Over the next hour, we chatted about Toby's limp. She insisted we book a vet appointment. It almost felt normal. Yet every time Sophie's phone buzzed, she'd glance at it with an anxious flicker in her eyes. If I leaned in too close, she'd angle the screen away. Once we finished eating, she cleaned up the containers, and I offered to wash the dishes. We worked in silence, side by side, with Toby perched in the corner. When I tried to meet her gaze, she'd smile, but it never quite reached her eyes. Afterward, Sophie announced she had paperwork to do, so she headed to the living room couch. Perfect exactly where the hidden camera was aimed. I stepped into the coat closet, pretending to hang my jacket, just to double-check the receiver. The tiny screen showed a live feed of Sophie flipping through her folder, phone next to her. Audio, however, would be limited. I'd have to rely on the older listening device I'd placed upstairs if she took a call there. Still, it was a start. I busied myself in the garage, tinkering with my workbench to keep up appearances. My mind was in overdrive. If Sophie decided to call Oliver, or if Oliver called her, I'd have footage. A wave of unease welled up in my stomach. What am I hoping to see? If it's an affair, that alone is devastating. If it's something worse, I almost didn't want to find out. An hour later, the rain subsided to a light drizzle. Sophie walked into the garage, startling me. "I'm heading out again," she said softly, fiddling with her car keys. "Another showing?" I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. She hesitated. "Yeah, another showing." It just came up. Her eyes wouldn't lock onto mine. "I'll be back. Later." I forced a nod, stepping aside so she could grab a spare umbrella. "Drive safe. The roads are still slick." She gave a terse nod and disappeared. Moments later, her car pulled out of the driveway. Once I heard the engine fade, I rushed back inside, heart pounding. This time I had the chance to check the camera footage on the receiver. Nothing significant, just her flipping through some papers, occasionally checking her phone. No phone calls made from the couch, at least not in that hour. Still, I saved the video. As Toby sniffed at my heels, I reflected on what I'd become, a husband surveilling his own wife. But the tension, the secrets, the mention of my name in Oliver's texts, it all warranted caution. If I learned one thing from my old life, it's to trust your instincts. And my instincts screamed that Sophie's facade was a lot more cracked than she let on. I wasn't sure what I expected to find that evening, but my heart was pounding anyway. For days, I'd been collecting snippets of Sophie's conversations with Oliver, logging them on a small recorder that I kept hidden in the garage. Her sudden late nights, the cryptic calls, the tension hanging over every room, it all pointed to something darker than just an affair. Still, I told myself I might be overreacting. Maybe they were discussing shady real estate deals or personal secrets that had nothing to do with me. But all that denial vanished the minute I heard my name. My full name spoken in a sharp, clinical tone on a recording I played back alone in our spare bedroom. I was leaning against a stack of moving boxes, the recorder pressed close to my ear. Sophie's voice came through first, muffled but clear enough. "I know, Oliver, but Andrew isn't stupid. We have to be sure this gets handled before he catches on." My stomach churned. I hit pause, then pressed play again, determined not to miss any detail. Oliver's response was faint. "He won't see it coming. My guys are pros. You get the insurance. I get rid of the problem." I froze, a cold sweat prickling under my collar. This wasn't a misinterpretation. They were talking about me like an obstacle to be removed. I had to force myself to keep listening, pressing the headphone tighter. Sophie's voice turned steely. "It has to look like a break-in, or I won't see a dime. They said if it's suspicious, the insurance won't pay out for years." A wave of nausea hit me. My wife, this woman I'd shared a life with, was carefully planning my death to collect on a policy. I breathed out slowly. My training kicked in, like a safety valve that prevented me from panicking. "Don't freak out," I told myself. "Stay calm. Assess." I heard a soft bark from downstairs Toby, probably reacting to some noise outside. That gentle reminder of normalcy almost brought tears to my eyes. Here I was, crouched on an old rug in a dusty spare room, discovering that my wife wanted me dead for money. I flicked off the recorder and rubbed my temples. My first instinct was rage, pure and simple. How dare they do this to me? But under the anger there was heartbreak like a crack running through my chest, reminding me how deeply I'd once cared for Sophie and how thoroughly she'd betrayed me. For a moment I found myself thinking about that day we said our vows. I remember her bright grin, how she squeezed my hand at the altar. It felt real. Did any of it matter now? I had to make a decision. I needed someone I could trust, someone who wouldn't be rattled by the scale of this. My mind immediately went to an old colleague, Quinn Palmer. Quinn and I stayed in loose contact after I left my previous career behind. He was the only one who never pried too much when I disappeared into suburban life. More importantly, he was a technical genius: cybersecurity, surveillance, you name it. I dug out my phone, paused. Calling Quinn wasn't just an emotional step, it was strategic. If Oliver already had pros on the case, I needed high-level support. Gathering my resolve, I dialed Quinn's number, cursing how badly my hand shook. He picked up on the fourth ring. "You better have a damn good reason for calling me this late, buddy." "Quinn, it's Andrew," I whispered, suddenly paranoid Sophie might come home and overhear. "I need help. It's serious." There was a beat of silence. Then Quinn's tone shifted from casual to alert. "Tell me." I didn't give him every detail on the phone. I just explained I was in trouble, that my life might be at risk, and I had evidence. The line crackled for a second, and Quinn finally said, "Jesus, Andrew, this better not be some half-baked paranoia." "It's not," I said flatly. "I'll meet you somewhere safe soon." He exhaled, sounding resigned. "Fine, but if you vanish on me again—" "I won't," I assured him, though my head was spinning. "Thank you, Quinn." When I hung up, I felt a grim kind of relief. Knowing I wasn't alone in this gave me a thread of stability. Slowly, I got up, wincing at the cramped muscles in my legs. My mind drifted to Sophie's part in all this. That last snippet kept echoing. It has to look like a break-in, or I won't see a dime. She wasn't being coerced, she was actively orchestrating it. For a moment, I let the heartbreak wash over me. I recalled silly memories like that time she tried to bake a cake for my birthday and ended up lighting part of the oven on fire. Or when she got Toby from the shelter because she said every home needed at least one loyal soul. All those moments now felt like illusions. Or maybe Toby's the only loyal soul left, I thought bitterly. I needed to hold it together. I couldn't afford to confront her right now. Oliver had resources, money, and apparently a willingness to hire professional killers. My job was to outthink them, to use the skill set I'd locked away since leaving the Marine Corps and CIA. I never wanted to open that toolbox again, but survival trumped my desire for a quiet life. Downstairs, Toby padded around the kitchen, nails clicking on the linoleum. I went to him, giving his ears a slow rub. "Things are about to get messy, boy," I murmured, feeling a hollow ache. "But I promise you, we'll get through it." He looked up, tail swishing faintly, as if he understood more than I realized. I spent the next few hours scanning the house for any signs that might indicate how soon they planned on making a move. I checked Sophie's drawers, her purse, her desk. Under a stack of real estate flyers, I found a file labeled insurance. My pulse quickened. Inside were premium statements for a life insurance policy with a massive payout. My name was all over it as the insured, with Sophie as the sole beneficiary. The last dated conversation with the insurance agent was only a week ago. Slipping the file back, I tried to quell the rage building in my chest. This wasn't accidental. She'd been planning for some time, or at least testing the waters for a large payoff. I needed more, though: dates, times, details about how Oliver planned to execute this. Checking the time, I realized it was almost 11 p.m. Sophie was supposed to be meeting a client. But I knew better. She could walk through that door any minute. My first step had to be locking down my intel, stashing the recordings and any other evidence in a secure location. Then I'd meet Quinn. We'd figure out how to counter Oliver's pros. Before I could dwell too long on how insane it all sounded, my phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Don't wait up. Wrapping up late. Might stay at a friend's place, too tired to drive." My jaw clenched. Even now, she was weaving her lies. The idea that I used to believe them so easily made me cringe at my own naivety. I typed back a short reply. "Okay, be safe." Let her think I was blissfully unaware. The seeds of suspicion I once had sprouted into the cold reality that my wife and her lover wanted me dead. That knowledge pressed against my ribcage like a loaded gun, one I had to handle carefully. Sitting at our kitchen table, Toby at my feet, I jotted down a list of what I'd need. A safe meeting spot with Quinn, my old operational gear stored away in the house, a separate phone line that Sophie didn't know about. My mind raced with memories of training plan. Observe. Adapt. I repeated that mantra, letting it sharpen my thoughts. This was the new normal, it seemed. No more illusions of a simple life or a typical marriage. The line had been drawn, and I was on the side of survival. Slowly, methodically, I slid the recorder into a Ziploc bag, tucking it inside a hollowed-out space in the garage wall. I looked down at Toby. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "we'll take the first step to protect ourselves." He gave a quiet huff, as if in agreement. And so, with my heart heavy and my resolve hardened, I prepared for the battle that was about to unfold, one I never asked for, but one I was fully capable of winning. Early the next morning, I drove out of town with Toby in the passenger seat, heading to a remote stretch of land near an abandoned industrial site. Gray clouds sat low over the horizon, and a stiff wind rattled the rusted fences. This was the kind of place that'd make anyone uneasy, but it was ideal for a discreet meeting. No cameras, no onlookers, just a wide-open parking lot filled with cracked asphalt. I parked beside a dilapidated loading dock and kept the engine running. Toby panted, occasionally glancing my way. "Relax, buddy," I said, though I wasn't sure which of us I was trying to reassure. After a few minutes, a black SUV rumbled up, headlights sweeping across the deserted lot. The vehicle stopped about 20 feet away. Out stepped Quinn Palmer. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe he just carried himself differently now. He wore a simple gray hoodie and jeans, scanning the area with sharp eyes. When he spotted me, he gave a quick nod. I left Toby in the truck, walking over to greet Quinn. He didn't waste time. "All right, Andrew," he said quietly. "Talk." I glanced around, made sure we were alone. "Sophie, my wife, and her boss are plotting to kill me for insurance money." The words felt surreal, but I kept my tone level. "They've got professional hitmen lined up, apparently. I have partial recordings, but I need more evidence to confirm who's involved and how soon it'll happen." Quinn studied me, face impassive. "Sounds like a nightmare." "Are you sure you're not imagining it?" I finished bitterly. "I wish I were. Listen." I pulled out a USB flash drive containing short clips of the audio I'd salvaged. "This is real, Quinn. I need your help to dig deeper, maybe hack some phone records or track texts between Sophie and Oliver." He nodded, slipping the drive into his pocket. "I'll see what I can do. But, Andrew, you realize how serious this is, right? You could involve the cops." My jaw tightened. "I could, but the local police might not have the resources to deal with Oliver's corporate connections. And I suspect he has people on his payroll. This needs a more targeted approach." Quinn let out a slow breath. "You've changed, man. Last time I saw you, you wanted nothing but a quiet life." I swallowed hard, thinking of how quickly that dream had evaporated. "I still do, but I have to protect myself." Then I waved a hand at my truck. "Look, Toby's with me. I'm not even sure I can leave him at home safely anymore." Quinn followed my gaze to the dog peering at us through the windshield. "We'll figure this out," he said finally. "I'll run an analysis of their digital footprint. If they're using text, email, or even basic call encryption, I can crack it. Might take me a few days, though." "That's fine." I exhaled, relief warring with dread. "In the meantime, I need to prepare for whatever they plan to do." He glanced at me curiously. "Meaning?" I locked eyes with him. "I still have some. Gear. Stuff I put away when I left the CIA. I never thought I'd need it again. But if they're bringing professionals, I can't just stand by with my thumb up my ass." Quinn didn't flinch. "Make sure you keep it quiet. If they sense you're onto them, they might accelerate their timeline." "Agreed," I muttered. "Listen, once you find anything, call me on this number." I handed him a small slip of paper with a burner phone I'd recently picked up. "Not my usual cell. Sophie monitors that sometimes." He stuffed it in his hoodie pocket. "All right, what about payment? I'm not exactly a charitable organization." I grimaced. "I have some savings. We'll work something out." He studied me for a moment, as if gauging my sincerity, then nodded. "Fine, but Andrew, be careful. This could get ugly fast." "Trust me," I said, my voice low. "I know." With that, we parted ways, Quinn heading back to his SUV and me climbing into the driver's seat with Toby. As I watched him pull away, I felt a mixture of gratitude and anxiety. Gratitude that someone had my back, anxiety that I was stepping into a covert battle. I drove home, mind racing, Once inside the garage, I carefully ushered Toby into the house and headed to a locked cabinet in my workshop. Behind a panel, I found the footlocker. My hands shook just a bit as I lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged, were relics of a life I'd tried to bury. A compact pistol, a disassembled rifle, communication jammers, a knife with a black handle that still had a faint scratch from an old mission. Each item triggered a memory of places I'd served, enemies I'd taken down, secrets I'd kept. In another compartment, I found an envelope stuffed with enough cash to pay Quinn for immediate expenses. The rest I could wire carefully, once I made sure my accounts were secure from Sophie's prying eyes. I ran my hand over the rifle's metal, a wave of reluctance sweeping through me. I never wanted to be that person again, the one who lived in the shadows. But if Sophie and Oliver had made me their target, I had no choice but to match their cunning with my own. For the rest of the afternoon, I performed a basic check on each piece of gear. The jammers still powered on, although they beeped a bit ominously. I'd probably have to do a small fix to ensure they covered the frequencies I needed. The pistol needed cleaning, so I set it aside. My training took over, methodical and calm. Muscle memory guided me, letting my emotions settle into a cool, focused determination. I paused only when my phone buzzed. I checked the screen Sophie, ironically. My heart thumped. Her text read, "Won't be back until late. Another client emergency." She always had a reason these days. I typed a short reply. "Take care." Then I set the phone aside and stared at the footlocker. If she knew I'd unlocked this relic of my past, she'd likely be panicking. That thought brought a grim smile to my face. She had no clue what I was capable of. By evening, I'd stashed the gear in strategic spots around the house places Sophie didn't frequent, or that I could easily lock. I decided not to booby-trap anything yet. It was too early. I needed Quinn's intel first. But it felt oddly reassuring, having my tools close at hand, like having a lifeline hidden beneath the mundane details of daily life. Before bed, I fed Toby and took him for a quick walk. The night sky was cloudy again, a faint moon lighting the suburban street. A neighbor, Miss Alvarez, waved at me from her porch. "Working late again?" she asked, noticing my tired face. "Yeah," I forced a smile. "Busy season at the site." She shook her head sympathetically. "Don't burn yourself out." I thanked her and kept walking, Toby sniffing every hydrant. Part of me felt guilty, lying to a friendly neighbor about my real troubles. But Miss Alvarez didn't need to get dragged into this mess. No one did. Back home, the house was dark, just the way I left it. No sign of Sophie. I locked up, double-checked the windows, a new sense of vigilance settling in. Anyone trying to break in right now would find a well-armed occupant, not an unsuspecting victim. I might not know exactly when or how they planned to strike, but I was no longer in denial. I took Toby upstairs, settling into bed with my phone nearby. Just before drifting off, my mind wandered to Sophie's face, her smile, once full of genuine warmth, now replaced by deceit. An ache formed in my chest again, but I shoved it aside. She'd chosen this path. So had Oliver. The next step was making sure I survived it. Monday morning found me in the kitchen, flipping through local news channels with half an ear while I sipped coffee. Toby napped at my feet, content after an early walk. Part of me felt numb, but the other part was hyper-alert, waiting for any sign that Sophie was on to my growing suspicions. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. She came downstairs in a tailored blouse, hair pinned back. An odd wave of nostalgia hit me. She looked so put together, I thought, like she used to on normal days, except these days were anything but normal. "Morning," she said, barely meeting my eyes. I forced a casual nod. "You're up early. Everything okay?" She shrugged, glancing at her phone. "Busy day ahead with Oliver. We have a bunch of showings. I might not be back until late." Her eyes flicked to my empty coffee mug. "You want me to make a pot before I leave?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity of her offering coffee while plotting to kill me, but I just shook my head. "I'm good, thanks." She tapped her nails against the counter, looking vaguely restless, then waved goodbye and headed out the door. I waited until I heard her car pull away before letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Toby lifted his head, as if to say, "We're still safe." I gave him a quick pat. "We're okay for now," I whispered. At my construction site, I tried to go about my normal tasks, framing, measuring beams, and coordinating with the foreman. But I couldn't shake the sense that I was in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse. During my lunch break, I snuck into a quiet alley behind the hardware store and checked in with Quinn on the burner phone. "Got your text," he said by way of greeting. I found a few interesting details. Oliver's phone pinged a handful of suspicious numbers, likely burner cells, and I'm seeing some big cash withdrawals from his personal bank account over the last few weeks. My pulse kicked. Could be the money he's paying for the hit. "Exactly," Quinn replied. "Sophie's phone records are minimal, but there are consistent calls with Oliver late at night. I'm working on cracking any encrypted messages they might have. Also, I found multiple references to a Victor in Oliver's emails, but no last name yet." I clenched my jaw. "Keep digging. If these guys are professionals, they'll use aliases. But anything you find helps." "Roger that," Quinn said, then paused. "Stay safe, Andrew." Back at the site, I labored through the day, nodding politely to coworkers and trying to hide the storm brewing inside me. In the evening, I found Sophie waiting at home, an unexpected twist. She was in the living room, Toby at her feet. My dog, ironically, seemed content as she scratched behind his ears. I forced a neutral expression. "You're home early," I said, taking off my boots. She shrugged. "Oliver had to run off to some meeting, so the showings ended sooner than planned." She smiled then, and for a fleeting moment it almost looked genuine. Figured I'd make dinner for once. My stomach twisted. Had she sensed something? Or was she simply playing the dutiful wife card to keep me clueless? If I wanted to maintain my own cover, I had to act normal. "That sounds nice," I replied softly. "I'll go wash up." Over dinner pasta and a salad, she peppered me with small talk, asking about my day, the projects at work. I gave non-committal answers, mixing in enough detail to sound real. But the tension beneath our words was palpable, like we were both performing roles in a half-hearted play. Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned, then apologized and stepped away to take the call. That was my cue. Quickly, I retrieved the small audio receiver I'd hidden behind a picture frame. It fed directly to the earpiece in my pocket. I tapped a button, hearing the static crackle. From the hallway, Sophie's voice drifted in, muffled. "No, I can't talk now. He's here. That's not my problem, Oliver. I told you it has to happen soon. Fine. Call them if you need to." I tensed, carefully slipping the earpiece out as she returned. "All good?" I asked, forcing a smile. She nodded, though she looked ruffled. "Just a client being indecisive." "Sounds frustrating," I said, playing dumb. We finished dinner with Toby watching us like he sensed the undercurrent of hostility. Afterward, she retreated upstairs, claiming she needed a shower. I hovered in the living room, grappling with the wave of unease that conversation stirred up. It has to happen soon. Later that night, I decided it was time to test some of my defensive preparations. While Sophie slept, I quietly activated motion sensors I'd placed at key entry points, windows, back door, garage. If these guys came for me in the middle of the night, I'd have an early warning system. I also tested a small jamming device in the basement, flipping the switch just long enough to see if it interfered with my phone signal. It did good. If assassins tried to coordinate by radio or phone, I could cut them off. While finishing my checks, I heard footsteps from above. My heart lurched. I flicked off the device, hiding it behind a stack of old paint cans. The basement door creaked, and Sophie appeared, clad in her robe. "Andrew? What are you doing down here?" I turned, forcing calm. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check the furnace. It's been making that rattling noise." She studied me, eyes narrowed. "At midnight?" "Yeah," I said with a shrug. "Sometimes these older units are unpredictable." She sighed. "Come to bed. It's late." For a second, I thought I saw suspicion flicker in her gaze. But she turned and padded upstairs without further comment. I followed a few minutes later, feigning exhaustion, my mind whirring. If Sophie got spooked, I risked them accelerating their plan or changing tactics. I had to maintain the clueless husband act just a bit longer. The next morning, she left for work again before I was fully awake. After doing a quick mental inventory of my gear, I headed out myself, stopping by a diner near the highway for coffee. My phone buzzed Quinn. He texted, "Got a partial ID on Victor, possibly ex-military, known to do off-the-books work. Watch your back." I stared at the message, a flood of old instincts returning. I remember dealing with ex-military mercenaries in my CIA days, efficient, ruthless, capable of blending in until the final strike. My chest tightened at the realization these were not amateurs. Any mistake could cost me my life. At the construction site, my coworker Brad mentioned I looked pale. "You feeling okay, man?" I forced a grin. "Yeah, just a little under the weather. I'll power through." No one else pressed me, which was a relief. By late afternoon, I returned home, half hoping Sophie might still be out. But her car was in the driveway. I braced myself as I walked in. She was in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge. She greeted me with an overbright smile. "How was work?" she asked, sounding like she cared. "Fine," I lied. "Busy, you?" She lifted a shoulder. "Had a talk with Oliver. Some big deals on the horizon." She hesitated, eyes flicking to Toby, dozing by the back door. "We might be getting a nice commission soon. Could help us travel or do something new." A cold shiver ran through me. She was talking about traveling like it was a real plan for our future, but I knew better. That nice commission was likely my life insurance money. I forced a nod and stepped out to check the mailbox as though it was normal. Inside, I found only a few coupons and a local flyer. My mind was already miles ahead, evaluating the next steps. Get more evidence, find the exact date they planned to strike. That night, I tested the motion sensors again, adjusting the angles so they wouldn't pick up random movement from Toby. Everything looked set. As I laid in bed, Sophie a few feet away, I realized just how twisted our relationship had become. She pretended to be a loving partner. I pretended to be oblivious. In truth, we were both lying through our teeth. 3 days later, I got what I'd been both dreading and waiting for. Undeniable proof that Sophie and Oliver had finalized the date and time they planned to end my life. It started in the early afternoon. I was off work, claiming I needed a personal day. In reality, I wanted to stay home and monitor my hidden cameras. Sophie thought I'd gone to run errands, so she felt free to invite Oliver over for a private meeting. I'd parked my truck a few blocks away and crept back on foot, slipping into the house from the side entrance that led to the basement. Toby, as usual, greeted me quietly, tail wagging. From my makeshift surveillance station, a small monitor connected to the hidden camera feed, I watched Oliver stride into the living room. He carried an expensive-looking leather briefcase, an air of confidence in every step. Sophie offered him a drink, which he declined. Their conversation started about real estate, but quickly shifted. I leaned in, my pulse drumming in my ears. "We need to move now," Oliver said firmly. "My guys are ready. Are you sure he'll be alone?" Sophie paced, arms crossed. "Andrew's out all day, maybe longer. If not tonight, then tomorrow. The insurance policy is in order, and I can't handle the stress of waiting anymore." My heart hammered. Tonight or tomorrow. So it was that imminent. I increased the volume just enough to catch every word. Oliver pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Here's the break-in plan. They'll force entry. Maybe from the back, 'cause enough chaos to make it look legit. If Andrew's home, they handle it. If he's not, they'll wait." Sophie nodded, lips tight. "I want it quick. No loose ends." Her voice was chillingly calm, sending a spike of fury through me. Oliver smirked. "It'll be quick. The team will call me once it's done. Then we call the cops. You do the grieving widow routine. Insurance pays out, and we're golden." Sophie didn't smile. She looked tense. "Just make sure your guys don't screw this up." Oliver set down the folder. "They won't. Victor is ex-military, and he's got 2 associates, Frank and Luis, also trained. They'll be in and out." My stomach twisted at those names. Victor, Frank, Luis. They'd probably show up carrying guns, expecting an easy target. I inhaled slowly, forcing myself to remain calm. They were about to discover I wasn't just a random construction worker, but I needed their plan locked in first. Sophie let out a small sigh. "Once it's done, I'll go to my sister's place. She'll confirm I was there if needed. Alibis. Then when the cops contact me, I'll play it by ear." Oliver approached her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're tense," he murmured, leaning in like a lover might. She didn't pull away. "But after tomorrow, you'll be free." That was all I could take. Anger surged, almost blotting out rational thought. Tomorrow. They were talking about murdering me tomorrow. Toby, lying beside me, seemed to sense my mood. He let out a low whine, and I gave him a reassuring pat. I forced myself to keep listening. They talked another few minutes, going over smaller details, entry points, how to make it look like a robbery, how to spin the story for the police. Sophie specifically mentioned taking the valuables, pointing out I usually kept my tools in the garage. She wanted it to look thorough enough to fool investigators. Finally, Oliver checked his watch. I have to go. Can't risk being seen here too long. Call me if anything changes. Sophie walked him to the door. Once he left, she stood in the foyer for a moment, face drawn. I studied her expression from the camera angle. She didn't look joyful or triumphant, more like she was bracing herself. Maybe there was a flicker of guilt, but it was overshadowed by determination. A minute later, she picked up her phone and dialed someone, likely her sister. I couldn't make out the exact conversation. The living room camera didn't pick up her voice well from that angle, but by her posture, she was confirming whatever alibi she needed. By the time she went upstairs, I realized my entire body was shaking. Gripping the edge of the monitor, I whispered, "They plan to kill me tomorrow, Toby." The dog just blinked, tail thumping once. My mind raced, flipping through the next steps. I had a small arsenal, enough to defend myself and set a trap for these hitmen. I also had Quinn's help on standby, but more than that, I needed to be absolutely sure I had all the evidence necessary to expose Oliver and Sophie after I neutralized the threat. Otherwise, they might spin the story, or Oliver might slip away. My advantage was that they had no idea I was onto them. They still thought I was clueless Andrew Willard, busy working construction while they plotted in plain sight. Slowly, I exhaled, pulling out the hidden drive that recorded everything. I backed up the footage to a secure location, an external drive I kept in a locked tool chest. If anything happened to me, I wanted at least some record to exist that implicated them. But that wouldn't matter if I ended up 6 feet under. Survival came first. I called Quinn on the burner phone, whispering the news. "It's happening tomorrow. They have a plan. I have the details on camera." He let out a low whistle. "Damn, that's soon. What's your next move?" "I'll fortify the house," I said, swallowing hard. "Set it up so that when they come, they can't leave. I need you to be ready on the digital side, Quinn. If I take them down, I want Oliver's entire empire exposed, not just some low-level scapegoats. And Sophie. She has to face the consequences." A pause. Then Quinn's voice turned steely. "I'll have everything prepped. Just don't get yourself killed." "Believe me, I have no intention," I said, ending the call. Toby patted over, nuzzling my leg. I ruffled his fur, eyes drifting around the basement. My entire life had turned into a fortress-building exercise, but in a twisted way, it felt almost natural. Once a soldier, always a soldier. This time the war's at home. For the rest of the evening, I upgraded my motion sensors and tested a new vantage point for the camera near the back door. I also positioned some makeshift barricades in the garage stuff that would slow down intruders, giving me extra seconds to react. The plan forming in my head was simple. Let them come, let them think I'm an easy target, then pick them off systematically. At one point, I paused at the kitchen counter, a wave of emotion hitting me. I remembered the day Sophie and I first walked through this house together, how excited she was about the backyard and the bright living room. I thought we'd grow old here, raise a family maybe. Now it was about to become a battleground. The heartbreak was almost overwhelming. But heartbreak wouldn't keep me alive tomorrow. Strategy would. I steeled myself, focusing on what had to be done. If there was any lingering doubt about Sophie's guilt, it was erased by that conversation with Oliver. She was all in, discussing my death like a business transaction. Around midnight, Sophie came home, slipping upstairs without a word. I waited in the living room, lights off, listening to her footsteps. If she noticed I was awake, she didn't show it. Eventually, I dragged myself up to bed, finding her already asleep on her side, phone on the nightstand. Toby curled at the foot of the bed, eyes flicking between us. I lay there, mind buzzing with final details. The next day would determine everything. Either I'd outmaneuver their hired killers, or I'd end up another tragic news story. Tension coiled in my gut. I recalled Sophie's face when we first met, vibrant, earnest, and I realized that version of her was gone. Whatever love we had was lost in the shadow of greed and betrayal. I inhaled, letting my military training quell the surge of emotion. Tomorrow, I'd stand on the brink. If I survived, I'd make sure they paid for underestimating me. If I didn't, well, no point thinking that way. Better to keep my eyes on the goal. Stay alive. Expose them. End this nightmare. Somewhere around 3 a.m., I dozed off. Toby's gentle snoring the only comfort in a house set to become a war zone. There was no turning back now. I'd confirmed the kill order. Next, I'd turn their plan against them no matter what it cost me. That morning, I woke up feeling the weight of everything. My eyes drifted over to the empty space on Sophie's side of the bed. She'd already left, presumably to finalize more arrangements with Oliver. Toby lay at my feet, tail thumping dully against the sheets. Only a week ago, I would have felt crushed by fear. But now, something else simmered inside me, a sense of calm determination. If Sophie and Oliver thought they had me cornered, they were about to learn how wrong they were. I brewed coffee in silence, my mind working through the plan. I decided the best approach was to rattle them a little, make them question if I was truly the oblivious husband. Oliver's hired goons were dangerous, but they operated under the assumption I'd be easy prey. I intended to change that. Once my mug was half empty, I grabbed my phone, a simple prepaid cell Quinn had secured for me, and typed out an anonymous text to Oliver. All I wrote was, "We know what you're planning. Choose wisely." Then I hit send to one of the unlisted numbers Quinn believed Oliver used for illicit dealings. It was a risk, sure, but sometimes risk is a tool. By letting them taste a sliver of doubt, I hoped to provoke mistakes. Oliver might scramble to reinforce his plan. Sophie might sense a shift and get anxious. Either way, it gave me an edge. A surprise encounter. Later that afternoon, I headed to the local hardware store for additional supplies. I needed some specific items: extra batteries for my motion sensors, a secondary padlock for the garage, and a new router Quinn recommended for better encryption. The store was half empty, with a bored cashier flipping through a magazine behind the counter. As I rounded an aisle full of power tools, I nearly collided with my neighbor from 3 blocks down, Don Harris, a friendly guy who'd once hired me for a small backyard project. He gave me a hearty nod. "Hey, Andrew, haven't seen you around much. You doing okay?" My pulse spiked momentarily. The last thing I wanted was to slip up in casual conversation. "Yeah, just busy with new jobs," I lied smoothly. "What brings you here?" "Ah, the deck in my backyard's rotting. Need new boards and nails." He paused, eyeing the items in my cart. Cables, padlocks, weird connectors. "Upgrading security?" I shrugged, offering what I hoped passed for a relaxed smile. "Something like that. Lot of package thefts lately, so I'm adding some cameras." He grimaced sympathetically. "Yeah, can't be too careful. Good luck with that." We exchanged small talk for a minute, typical neighborly chatter about the weather and the upcoming community barbecue. I nodded politely, heart still pounding. Every conversation felt like a landmine. The truth my wife's lethal betrayal lurked behind every mundane word. Eventually, he wished me well, and I moved on, grabbing the last things on my list. At checkout, the teenage cashier eyed my supplies. "Building a fortress?" she joked. I forced a laugh. Just the basics. My mind was already back home, picturing the new security layers I'd set up that evening. Sophie's shifts. I arrived home to see Sophie's car in the driveway. That set me on edge. She typically texted if she got back early. I stiffened, half expecting an ambush. But the house was quiet. I found her in the living room, perched on the couch with a laptop. Toby lay nearby, lazily flicking his tail. She looked up, a bit startled. "You're back. Where were you?" "Hardware store," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Needed some stuff to fix up a few things around the house." She closed her laptop. "You've been really into fixing up lately." I shrugged. Nothing wrong with updating the place. My eyes flicked to her laptop. Busy day at work? A hint of tension crossed her features. "It was fine. Oliver canceled a meeting last minute, so I came home." I wondered if that cancellation was Oliver's reaction to the cryptic text I'd sent. I held back a grim smile. Hope everything's all right on his end. She forced a tight nod, then stood, brushing off imaginary lint from her skirt. "I'm just tired. I might lie down for a bit." With that, she slipped past me, her perfume hanging in the air. I waited until I heard the bedroom door shut. Then I moved to the couch and tapped the laptop's trackpad. It was locked, prompting a password, no surprise. But it confirmed Sophie was feeling protective of her digital space. Maybe she'd sensed a ripple in Oliver's confidence. Building unease. After stowing the hardware supplies in my workshop, I crouched in the basement to check my phone. Quinn had messaged, "Oliver's finances are fluctuating. He transferred a large sum out this morning, likely to the hitters. Might be spooked." I typed back, "Good, keep watch." Before I could pocket the phone, I heard footsteps overhead. Sophie was moving around. For a heartbeat, I panicked. Did she suspect I was in the basement, plotting? But soon enough, the footsteps receded, and the front door opened and shut. A look through the security feed on my tablet showed her driving off. Maybe she had an impromptu meeting with Oliver, or she was going to confirm arrangements. Either way, her abrupt departure aligned with the tension I hoped to create. If the text rattled Oliver, he'd either double down on the plan or try to change it. That might give me a window to control the narrative. Dinner with subtext by evening, Sophie returned, carrying a paper bag of takeout. She set it on the kitchen counter, her expression guarded. "I picked up Ty. Figured you'd be hungry." I set aside some blueprints I'd been pretending to examine cover story for a renovation project. "Thanks," I replied, meeting her gaze evenly. We dished up noodles and curry in silence, Toby watching from his usual spot in the corner. "How was your day?" she asked at last, too casually. "Productive. Got a lot of supplies," I said, picking at the noodles. "What about you?" Her posture tightened. "Just more property showings. Nothing exciting." Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her knuckles going white on the edge of the table. "Excuse me," she said, stepping away to take the call. I exhaled, heart thumping. She was definitely on edge. A minute later, she returned, forcibly calm. "Client call," she offered by way of explanation. "They're always so last minute." I just nodded. The rest of dinner was a stilted dance of small talk. My mind was already racing ahead. How would Oliver respond to the anonymous text? Would they accelerate their timeline, or would they retreat? My greatest advantage was staying unpredictable. When Sophie went upstairs, presumably for a shower, I used the chance to accidentally leave a business card from a local alarm company on the kitchen counter. She'd see it in the morning, a subtle hint that maybe I was upgrading security. Another psychological jab feeding her paranoia. Before bed, I popped into the garage to glance over my equipment. The sonic emitter I'd rigged up still powered on. The motion sensors were in place, though I'd have to calibrate them. Tomorrow, I'd step things up another notch with Quinn's digital assistance. The plan wasn't just about survival, it was about demonstrating I was no longer the unsuspecting target they assumed. Upstairs, I found Sophie in bed, toying with her phone. She didn't look up as I approached. Wordlessly, I slid under the covers, Toby plodding in to lie on the rug. After a few tense moments, she clicked off her phone's screen and turned over, back to me. I stared at the ceiling, adrenaline still pulsing. In my mind, I pictured Oliver reading my message, seething, telling Sophie or the hitmen that someone might know. Let him stew. Let them all worry. If there was one thing my old life taught me, it's that creating confusion in your enemy can be as powerful as any weapon. Eventually, my eyes closed. Toby's soft breathing lulled me to an uneasy sleep. I had no illusions that a single cryptic text would solve everything, but it was the first blow in a quiet war of nerves. And if I played it right, Oliver's arrogance, combined with Sophie's growing fear, would become my greatest advantage. Sunlight broke through the curtains when I woke, an unusual warmth spreading across the bedroom floor. Sophie was already gone again. I sat up, momentarily disoriented, before remembering where I was in this twisted chess match. Toby popped his head up from his dog bed, tail giving a soft wag. A quick shower later, I grabbed my burner phone. Quinn had promised fresh intel. Sure enough, he'd texted hours earlier. Oliver's accounts show repeated pings from a shell corporation, sizable funds shifting. Also found internal memos that board members are worried about missing money, could blow up soon. I typed back, "Perfect. Keep building the pressure." The hint of a smirk tugged at my lips. Oliver might be slick in the real estate market. But he wasn't invincible online. Quinn, with the right digital tools, could expose financial irregularities that would send Oliver's empire into a tailspin. The more stressed Oliver got, the more likely he'd be to slip up. After a quick breakfast, I dedicated the morning to finalizing the interior modifications I'd started. In the garage, I replaced an old router with a custom one Quinn had sent a device designed to securely store all the evidence I was collecting. I tested the feeds from my hidden cameras. They blinked to life, showing me the living room, kitchen, and exterior angles. A small sense of satisfaction crept in. Every angle was covered. Next, I rigged a backup generator to ensure that if the power mysteriously went out, perhaps the hitmen's tactic to create chaos, I'd still have cameras and basic lighting. The process took a couple of hours, and by noon, I was drenched in sweat, a series of wires coiled around my wrists like black snakes. While I was screwing the generator's casing shut, I heard a knock at the garage door. My heart skipped. Toby let out a low bark, trotting toward the sound. I slowly set my tools down, wiping my brow. If Sophie or Oliver had come unannounced, I needed to be ready. But when I cracked the door open, I found Miss Alvarez, an elderly neighbor from down the street. She held a Tupperware container, cheeks flushed. "Andrew, hi! I noticed you working and thought you might like some lunch." She offered a nervous smile. I made too much soup for myself. My tension eased. "Miss Alvarez," I said, taking the container carefully. "That's thoughtful. Thank you." She glanced past me into the garage. "Goodness, you're fixing quite a bit. Everything okay?" I mustered a reassuring grin. "Yeah, just trying to upgrade the place. I appreciate the food." She nodded, eyes flicking to Toby's wagging tail. "He's such a sweet dog. Well, enjoy. If Sophie's around, tell her I said hello." "I will," I answered, feeling a twinge of guilt. Miss Alvarez was just being kind, oblivious to the war behind these walls. Still, her warmth was a brief respite from the creeping paranoia. After she left, I set the soup inside on the kitchen counter, Toby close behind, and forced myself to take a brief break. Hours later, Quinn called. He rarely phoned, preferring texts. That told me something big was up. I answered in a low voice, stepping into the basement for privacy. "Andrew, you won't believe it," he said, excitement lacing his tone. "I hammered Oliver's networks. He's got hidden accounts in the Caymans, a shell company funneling bribes, and emails discussing illegal property flipping. I've started leaking small bits to his board members anonymously. They're freaking out." My heart pounded. "Good. That'll keep him distracted. Anything about the hired muscle?" "Some references to V, F, and L must be Victor, Frank, and Luis," Quinn said. "There's mention of final payment. It looks like Oliver's making sure they stay on track." I nodded to myself, tension coiling in my shoulders. "So they're still ready to move?" "Seems like it," Quinn affirmed. "But if Oliver's business is collapsing, he might rush the plan just to get the insurance money and vanish. Watch your back." "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I'm more prepared than he realizes." That evening, Sophie came home looking pale. She found me in the living room, Toby resting on my lap. For a moment, her eyes flicked to the TV, some mundane game show playing softly like she was expecting me to be up to something else. "Hey," I said, offering a casual nod. "You okay?" She swallowed, setting her purse down. "Just a rough day. Some chaos at Oliver's office. People are pointing fingers about missing funds, rumors of an internal audit. It's insane." I feigned mild surprise. "That's unfortunate. Is Oliver under suspicion?" She hesitated. "Not officially, but I can tell he's stressed." She sank onto the couch, a small sigh escaping her lips. "I don't know, Andrew. Everything feels off lately." An ironic statement, given she was plotting my death. I tried not to laugh. "I'm sorry," I murmured, placing a hand near her shoulder without actually touching her. "Maybe it'll blow over soon." She nodded, though her gaze was distant, as if mentally replaying a conversation with Oliver. Then her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She checked it, tensed. "I'll be right back," she muttered, leaving the room. I counted to 5, then switched to my secure feed in the basement. Sure enough, the living room mic picked up her low voice. "Oliver, calm down. We can't jump the gun. If we do it now, it might look suspicious. No, just give me a day or two." I paused the feed, exhaling slowly. She wanted time. Oliver was pushing to accelerate. My text, Quinn's leaks, the swirling rumors they were cornered. Perfect. Let them scramble. The more emotional they got, the more likely they'd fumble. After dinner, which was a tense affair of microwaved leftovers and forced conversation, I excused myself to the garage. I could feel Sophie's eyes on me, but she didn't protest. She simply retreated upstairs. In the garage, I moved to the new router Quinn had given me. With a few quick keystrokes on my laptop, I uploaded some of the recordings, Sophie discussing the plan, Oliver confirming the hitmen to an encrypted cloud server Quinn set up. This way, if anything happened to me, the evidence would find its way to the authorities. A dead man's switch, essentially. My mind drifted back to an op I once ran overseas. We'd used psychological pressure to break up an enemy cell from within, feeding them false intel until they turned on each other. Different context now, but the principle was the same: stir chaos, exploit weaknesses, and strike when they're disoriented. A sudden noise behind me made me jump Toby sniffing around a stack of boxes. I exhaled shakily, giving him a pat. "Gotta keep it together, boy. Just a little longer." He stared up at me, tail wagging once. I took a moment to scratch his ears, letting the repetitive motion calm my racing thoughts. If all went well, Oliver and Sophie's operation would crumble under Quinn's digital assault, leaving them desperate enough to make mistakes. That was the plan, anyway. By midnight, the house was quiet again. Sophie locked herself in the bedroom, presumably texting Oliver or stewing in her own nerves. I went through a final checklist: cameras rolling, motion sensors on, evidence backed up. Everything was in place for the next step, my step. Once Oliver's meltdown reached a certain peak, the trap we'd set for the hitmen would become even more effective. I headed upstairs, Toby close at my heels. Outside the closed bedroom door, I paused, listening. Soft murmurs told me Sophie was still on a phone call. I caught only fragments. "The money, will figure it out, calm down." Then her voice dropped too low to hear. Slipping into the spare bedroom, I lay down on the old mattress. Sleep felt distant. I kept replaying Quinn's triumphant voice, the fear in Sophie's eyes, the swirl of corporate drama Oliver was facing. This is what psychological warfare looks like, I reminded myself. A slow grind of stress, suspicion, and crumbling illusions. And so I let the exhaustion of the day drag me under, hoping tomorrow's round of digital chaos would bring Oliver one step closer to collapse, and me one step closer to ensuring they'd never see me as a victim again. I woke up with a plan already fully formed. Over the last few days, I'd chipped away at Oliver's confidence and Sophie's composure. Quinn's data leaks had made Oliver's empire unstable. Now it was time to pull the assassins onto my turf, where I had the upper hand. I spent the early morning making our house look deceptively normal. I tidied the living room, left the curtains partially open, and stacked a few unopened Amazon boxes near the front door to imply I was too distracted or naive to handle them. A perfect stage, as I like to call it. A house that seemed ordinary, but in reality was wired with hidden cameras, motion sensors, and a few other nasty surprises. At around 9 a.m., I called my construction foreman, faking a hoarse voice. "Hey, man, I woke up feeling like death. Got chills, can't stop coughing. I'm sorry I won't make it in today." He sounded sympathetic. "No worries, Andrew. Rest up. Call if you need anything." "Thanks," I replied, then hung up. In reality, I felt perfectly fine. But if the hit team was watching, or if Oliver had someone tailing me, they needed to see me home alone, vulnerable. The key was to appear exactly how Sophie and Oliver wanted me to be. An easy target. I then texted Sophie something along the lines of, "Staying home sick, don't worry about me." She replied half an hour later with a terse, "Okay, hope you feel better soon." The subtext was laughable. She was probably passing the info straight on to Oliver. Andrew's home, ripe for the picking. The next few hours were all about fine-tuning. I double-checked the motion sensors by the windows. A slight wave of my hand triggered a tiny red light to flash on the control panel, a good sign. For the back door, I placed a discreet floor mat rigged to emit a soft alarm if someone stepped on it. Inside a closet near the living room, I installed a small sonic pulse device Quinn had helped me modify. If the intruders made it that far, I could disorient them with a high-frequency tone. Up in the attic, I cleared a vantage spot so I could observe certain areas through a hidden slot in the wall. It was cramped, but it gave me a perfect angle to watch the living room. If the hitmen tried to wait for me, I could keep tabs without them knowing. Finally, I mounted a small mirror near the stairwell, angled just so I could see a reflection of anyone creeping around the corner. It felt surreal, turning our home into a war zone. But that was the hand they dealt me. Around midday, Toby and I took a brief walk outside, deliberately showing myself on the front lawn. I watered the plants, pretended to read the mail, all while scanning the street for suspicious vehicles. A white sedan passed by twice, but I couldn't tell if it was just a neighbor or someone scoping the place. Back inside, I fed Toby, then settled on the couch, flicking on some mindless TV show. I wanted it to look like I was dozing on and off, a sick man exhausted by the flu or whatever cover story they believed. In the background, I monitored the cameras on my phone. Every creak of the house set my nerves on edge, adrenaline trickling through my veins. Sitting there, I had too much time to think. Memories flooded back. Marine training days when we'd learn how to stage an ambush, the CIA ops where I had to coax informants into stepping onto friendly ground. It felt both familiar and horrifying. This was my home, our home, and yet I was orchestrating a battlefield scenario within it. I thought of Sophie, the early days of our marriage, how she used to snuggle against me on this very couch while we joked about silly reality shows. Now she was part of a plot to kill me. The betrayal cut deep, but I buried the ache under steely resolve. Focus, I whispered to myself, switching channels idly to keep up the facade. Toby rested his chin on my knee, warm and reassuring. He didn't understand the stakes, but he knew I was anxious. By late afternoon, Quinn sent a text. Intercepted a message from Oliver's phone. He's home. Time to move. Make it look clean. The hitters might come tonight. My pulse hammered. This was it, my carefully set stage about to be tested. My best guess was they'd break in late, believing the darkness gave them an advantage, but I had the advantage of readiness. I typed back, understood, keep me posted. Now came the hardest part, waiting. I couldn't betray any sign of alertness. If they were watching the house from somewhere, they had to see me as a clueless husband dozing off on the couch. So I forced myself to heat up some soup, rummage in the fridge, pretend to check my phone for social media. Every mundane action felt like a performance in a suspense film, each move loaded with tension. As twilight fell, the air seemed charged. Toby whimpered at one point, pacing near the back door, and I checked the camera feed, nothing yet. But the crickets outside sounded unnaturally loud, as if heralding an impending storm. Before full darkness set in, I slipped upstairs, locked the bedroom door, and donned a small earpiece connected to the house's internal cameras. Then I rechecked the pistol I'd retrieved from my old footlocker. I'd loaded it with non-lethal rounds, rubber bullets, preferring to incapacitate these men for an interrogation if possible. Killing them outright might rob me of crucial intel. Still, I kept lethal rounds handy just in case. In the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of my reflection. My eyes looked older, harder than they did even a month ago. A man preparing for a fight in his own home wasn't something I ever wanted to be, yet here I stood. I went back downstairs, left the lights on in the living room, and turned off the hallway lights to create shadowed corners. The illusions had to be perfect. Me, apparently just resting, barely paying attention to the outside world. Toby curled up on the rug, occasionally looking at me like he sensed the tension. My phone vibrated. A quick glance showed a message from Quinn. Oliver's meltdown intensifying. Board meeting called. He's furious. Also, Sophie tried to withdraw a large sum from your joint account. I gritted my teeth. More betrayal she was probably prepping to run if things went sideways. Let her. I had a bigger concern. Tonight's visitors. If they succeeded, it wouldn't matter what Sophie did with the money. Time crawled. I feigned reading a magazine, flipping pages without really looking. Toby eventually dozed off, lulled by my forced calm. Outwardly, I was a bored husband channel surfing. Inwardly, every nerve was taut, waiting for the moment the door might splinter under forced entry, or the motion sensors quietly alerted me to a presence. At some point, Miss Alvarez's porch light glowed through the window. Another neighbor walked a dog under the faint glow of street lamps. Life went on as usual in the neighborhood while I prepared for an impending showdown. Around 10 p.m., Sophie texted, "Spending the night at a friend's. Don't wait up." My blood ran cold. She was making sure she wasn't in the line of fire. This had to be it, the perfect alibi for her. I typed back a short reply, "Okay, feel better." A bitter irony in those words. I stood, stretched, and switched off the living room TV. Then I dimmed the lights, creating an environment that invited an intruder to think I'd gone to bed. Let them come. Every inch of the house was now my battleground. Before settling in, I glanced at Toby. "All right, buddy," I murmured. "It's almost time. We got this." He regarded me with trusting eyes. In that moment, I vowed that no matter what, I'd keep him safe. Sophie might have turned our marriage into a cruel game, but Toby was innocent in this war. I took a final look at the camera feeds on my phone, still clear. The clock read 10:22 p.m. I made my way quietly into the attic vantage point, carrying my pistol with the rubber rounds chambered, a flashlight, and a small first aid kit. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing measured. The night pressed in, silent and waiting. Any minute now, I told myself. The house was ready, I was ready. The hitmen would soon learn this was no hapless victim waiting to be robbed. I was the predator in this scenario, and they'd walked straight into my lair. I crouched in the attic, the air dusty and thick. From the narrow gap in the wall, I had a partial view of the living room. I could also see part of the front door. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the trees and sending soft shadows dancing across the windows. My throat felt dry, adrenaline coursing through me. It was almost midnight. The house stood eerily quiet, Toby lying in the corner of the living room, occasionally twitching an ear. I'd trained him to stay calm if people he didn't know appeared, but I still worried about his safety. A part of me almost wished he'd hide upstairs, away from any potential crossfire, but Toby was stubborn. He liked to be near me. As the minutes stretched, doubts began to creep in. What if they changed plans again? What if Oliver told them to bail? Could they come tomorrow instead? My mind battled the tension of a plan that might not unfold on schedule. I forced myself to breathe and remember. Sophie said tonight. She'd texted me about staying at a friend's place, a sure sign she believed the job would happen imminently. In the hush, my thoughts turned to Sophie. Why? The question looped in my head. Why had she gone so far? Was it purely money, or had there been a moment she decided she hated me enough to end everything? The ache of betrayal nearly made me tremble, but I shoved it down. Focus. I needed to survive the night first. Emotions could wait. At 12:15 a.m., my phone vibrated softly. The caller ID showed a blocked number. My pulse spiked. I accepted the call, keeping my voice low. "Hello?" A moment of static, then Sophie's voice. "Andrew?" She sounded off nervous, maybe even sad. Are you awake?" I swallowed. Toby lifted his head at the sound of her voice. "Yeah, couldn't sleep," I lied, scanning the live feeds on my second device. No sign of movement yet. She let out a shaky breath. "I just wanted to check on you, see how you're feeling." A wave of bitter anger rose in me. This was the final act, the concerned wife routine, making sure I was indeed home and presumably vulnerable. "I'm all right." "Stomach's upset, but I'll manage," I said, hearing the quiver in my tone, maybe from rage or heartbreak, I couldn't tell. There was a long pause. I pictured her somewhere safe, phone in hand, ready to act the grieving widow by morning. "Okay," she finally murmured. "Just take care of yourself, okay?" The gall of it made me grind my teeth. "Thanks. You too," I managed, voice trembling with suppressed fury. Toby sensed my tension, whining softly. "I'll see you soon, Sophie." "Sure," she whispered. Then the line clicked, going dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, letting the silence settle in. That was it, the last conversation I'd have with her before everything changed forever. Alone in the attic, I felt raw emotion welling up, sorrow, anger, even a twisted nostalgia for the days when a phone call from Sophie meant something else, comfort, love, normalcy. Shutting my eyes, I took a slow breath. She's gone, I reminded myself. The woman I married was an illusion. Outside, a gust of wind rattled the gutter, snapping me back to the present. Time to finalize my mental readiness. I glanced at the camera feeds, still empty. My knees ached from crouching, so I shifted position, mindful not to make noise. Toby settled again, trusting me, oblivious to the lethal intentions swirling in the night. A swirl of recollection. That day we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue. Sophie's laughter, so open and genuine, had cut through my usual reserve. I'd found her intelligence captivating, her ambition inspiring. For a moment I wondered if some part of her had genuinely loved me, or if it was always about status. My mind replayed our wedding vows a crisp autumn day, her auburn hair catching the light, Toby only a puppy back then, frolicking in the background. All those little moments that now felt like illusions. Part of me wanted to rage, to cry, to demand answers. But another part just wanted to end this twisted game. Tension in the shadows. The house groaned as if reflecting my inner turmoil. I checked the time, 12:45 a.m. Any moment now, I thought, my stomach churning. Another half hour passed. My eyelids drooped, but I forced them open. Adrenaline alone couldn't keep me awake forever, but the fear of missing the crucial moment did. Then, around 1:20 a.m., a sensor alert flashed on my device movement near the backyard fence. My heart kicked. I pressed a button on the phone to cycle through the cameras. In the dim glow of a street lamp, I caught a fleeting silhouette, a figure hopping the fence, then another. Toby's ears perked, but he stayed still, well trained to remain quiet unless I commanded otherwise. My muscles tensed. They were here. Slowly, I eased into position, pistol in hand, switching the camera feed to the living room angle. The back door was locked, but I'd purposely left one window slightly ajar so they'd see it as a point of entry. Sure enough, on the camera, two forms approached that window, shining a small flashlight inside. I flicked a switch on my phone, activating silent mode on the sensors. If they tripped them, I'd see it, but no alarm would ring to warn them. I wanted them confident. Let them think it was a routine break-in. Toby glanced at me, eyes reflecting concern. I placed a reassuring hand on his back. "Stay," I mouthed. Cliffhanger. The next moment stretched in slow motion. The window slid open and one figure hoisted himself inside. The camera caught a glimpse of dark clothing, a ski mask, something metallic glinting likely a pistol. A second figure followed. They moved with efficiency, scanning the living room. Toby tensed, but he stayed put, ears alert. I inhaled, forcing my pulse to steady. Step by step, I'd funnel them deeper into the house, away from the window, before engaging. My vantage from the attic was perfect for that, but I couldn't help the swirl of dread and anticipation churning in my gut. This was it, the collision of my past and present, the betrayal from my wife, the lethal trap Oliver had set. Except I was the one in control now. In the living room feed, the intruders advanced, guns raised. One of them whispered something inaudible to the other. Toby let out a quiet growl just enough to draw their attention. They exchanged glances, clearly expecting a sleeping husband, not a watchful occupant. They crept closer, searching for me. This was the calm before the true storm. "Stay calm," I told myself again, adjusting my grip on the pistol. "They don't know you see them. They don't know you're ready." In a matter of seconds, the silence would shatter, and the final act would begin. My final thought before I engaged was of Sophie's last words on the phone. "Take care of yourself." I stifled a bitter laugh. She'd see soon enough how well I'd taken care. Then, heart pounding, I exhaled and prepared to strike back, knowing the next moments would determine everything. I gripped the pistol in my right hand, crouched in the attic's cramped space, heart hammering behind my ribs. Through the narrow gap in the wall, I watched the men move carefully through the living room below. In the dim glow of the streetlights outside, they appeared as dark silhouettes, 3 of them. I could tell by the way they moved that they knew what they were doing. They swept their flashlights over the furniture, the doorways, scanning corners as if they'd practiced 100 times before. Victor, Frank, and Luis. Even without hearing their names, I'd have guessed they were ex-military. They had that purposeful stillness about them, the kind that comes from hours of drilling and real-world missions. Except this time, they thought they were dealing with a clueless homeowner, someone they could corner, eliminate, and vanish without a trace. Toby, lying on his belly near the couch, let out a low growl. Instantly, the tallest intruder swung his flashlight in the dog's direction. I had to press my lips together, forcing myself not to call out. I couldn't blow the advantage of surprise. Toby was playing his role. A loyal companion, but not an immediate threat. I prayed these men wouldn't hurt him. They whispered among themselves, guns at the ready. I flicked my phone to a secondary camera feed, verifying that all three were inside. The moment their third man cleared the window, I triggered the remote to lock the windows and doors. A soft whir signaled that my custom security bolts had engaged. The intruders, my intruders, were now sealed in, like fish in a barrel. A beep on my phone indicated their radio signals had been jammed. One of them tapped his earpiece, frowning. He tried it again and again, shaking his head. They probably expected to communicate with an outside lookout or with Oliver, but that line was gone. "Comms are down," one muttered, voice tight. It sounded like Victor Quinn had told me he was the ringleader. The other two glanced around, shifting uneasily. One jerked his chin toward the hallway, presumably leading to the bedrooms. They began moving in that direction, slow and methodical. My spine tingled, but I forced calm. They wanted to find me asleep. Instead, they'd encounter the labyrinth I'd created. I slid backward out of the attic vantage point, creeping down a narrow flight of stairs to the second floor. My shoulders brushed the walls in the tight space, each step a reminder that I had the home court advantage. Down below, a muffled thump echoed. Maybe they'd bumped the side table or Toby had moved. My pulse throbbed in my ears as I reached the hallway that overlooked the living room. A short railing, plus the darkness, kept me mostly hidden. From here I could see them inching closer to the stairs, flashlights cutting arcs in the gloom. Let's begin. With a deep breath, I pressed a switch on my phone. A silent command activated the first of my house's defenses, a small burst of sonic interference. The effect was immediate. They all jerked as if a sudden headache spiked through their skulls. One man cursed, grabbing his ear. Their formation broke, flashlights jittering over the walls. "What the hell is that?" hissed the shortest of the three. He massaged his temple, looking around wildly. Victor, clenching his jaw, barked, "Stay focused. Spread out. Find him." They split off Victor, heading toward the hallway on the right, the other two drifting closer to the staircase where I was hidden. My heart hammered. If they caught even a glimpse of me before I was ready, they might open fire. Calm, I reminded myself. Be the predator, not the prey. I raised my pistol loaded with rubber bullets and aimed at the man closest to Toby. The dog's hackles were raised, but he wasn't attacking, just baring his teeth. Good boy. I squeezed the trigger once, sending a round into the intruder's thigh. The man yelped, dropping to one knee. Before he could react, I fired again, catching his shoulder. He spun, cursing, flashlight clattering to the floor. Chaos erupted. The second intruder, Luis, I guessed, snapped his gun up, trying to pinpoint my location in the dark. He fired blindly, the muzzle flash illuminating the living room in strobes of orange. Plaster chipped from the banister behind me. Toby scrambled backward, whining. I ducked, ignoring the hot rush of fear. Another press on my phone triggered the overhead lights to flicker, further disorienting them. Then I popped out, firing 2 quick rounds at Luis's center mass. They were non-lethal, but it still slammed him onto the couch, knocking the wind out of him. He gasped, gun dropping from his grip. Victor, somewhere deeper in the hallway, yelled. The tall, broad shape of him appeared in the flickering light, gun raised. "Where are you?" he roared, scanning the upper floor. He fired a burst, bullets ripping through the walls. I crouched, feeling a sting on my forearm as splinters grazed the skin. "Damn it," I muttered under my breath, adrenaline spiking. One misstep and I could catch a lethal round. I slid along the floor, pressing my back against the hallway wall for cover. For a second, everything was silent except for ragged breathing and Toby's faint whimper. Victor shouted again, "Frank, you good? Luis?" A pained groan from the living room was Frank's only response. I risked a glance around the corner. Frank lay on his side, breathing heavily while Luis clutched his ribs. Both were incapacitated, though not unconscious. Perfect. My immediate worry was Victor. He was the professional among professionals. I crept forward, switching from rubber rounds to live ammo. My plan was to avoid killing them, but if Victor didn't yield, I had to protect myself. My left forearm throbbed. Checking it quickly, I realized it was just a shallow graze, no major bleeding. Could be worse. As I reached a corner near the staircase, I heard Victor's footsteps approach steady, controlled. He'd probably guessed the vantage I was using. The overhead lights still flickered, a strobe effect that turned the hallway into a disorienting tunnel. Then I heard a raspy voice below. Frank or Luis, calling out in a slur. "We're trapped, man. Something's up. Get out of here." Victor snarled, "No, we finished the job." Suddenly, a flashlight beam sliced across the stairs, nearly blinding me. Reflex took over. I aimed and fired a single live round into the hand holding the flashlight. The man bellowed, dropping both the light and his gun as he jerked his hand away. Metal clanged against the floorboards. I dashed forward, pistol raised. Victor, in agony, lashed out with a wild punch. His fist crashed into my shoulder, knocking me back against the wall. Pain burst across my collarbone, but I held onto my weapon. Before he could grab it, I slammed the pistol's butt into his temple. He staggered, collapsing onto one knee. Breathing ragged, I pressed the barrel to his chest. "You make another move! You die!" I hissed. Toby barked from below, as if echoing my threat. Victor froze, his breath hissing through clenched teeth. Blood trickled from his damaged hand. Adrenaline roared in my veins, but I forced myself to stay steady. I had all three subdued or badly wounded. My jammers had cut off their communications. They were locked in with me, no easy exit. Their plan to kill me had twisted into a nightmare for them. For a split second, I considered finishing Victor off, ending him right here, but I needed him conscious for what came next. Focus, I told myself. This is about exposing Oliver and Sophie. With a trembling breath, I pulled cable ties from my belt and forced Victor's arms behind his back, ignoring his pained gasps. Down in the living room, Frank lay panting, a low moan escaping him every time he tried to move. Luis had propped himself against the couch, half-conscious. I wasted no time descending the stairs, pistol still at the ready. Toby followed, staying behind me. My footsteps crunched on shattered glass from a picture frame they'd knocked over. Luis blinked up at me, fear plain on his face. Who are you?" he rasped, voice strained. I didn't answer. I kicked his gun farther away, then bound his wrists. Frank tried to mumble a protest, but when I aimed the pistol his direction, he went quiet. Once I had them all secured with zip ties, I stepped back, chest heaving. My ears rang from the gunshots and the brief sonic bursts. The living room smelled of gunpowder and sweat. No more illusions, no more secrets. I'd planned for an ambush, and it had worked. Above, Victor cursed. He'd managed to sit against the wall, cradling his injured hand. His eyes burned with hatred. You set us up," he spat. "This place was rigged." "Sure was," I said softly, sliding the pistol into my waistband. Toby sniffed around Frank's legs, then trotted back to me, tail low. "Welcome to my home." I pressed a button on my phone to kill the flickering lights and the disorienting sonic pulse. Steady lamplight returned, revealing the wrecked furniture, bullet holes, shattered frames. My sanctuary was a mess, but at least I was alive. They were the ones in deep trouble. I allowed myself a trembling sigh of relief. The real confrontation, the next part, would happen downstairs in the basement, where I'd prepared a less polite, more thorough environment for our conversation. But for a moment, I just needed to breathe. Blood trickled down my arm from the splinter graze, and every muscle ached. Toby licked my pant leg, an odd gesture of comfort. I reached down, patting his head. "Good boy," I whispered. Then, with a final glance at the stunned, tied-up intruders, I let the adrenaline subside. They had come expecting an easy kill. Instead, I'd turned their dawn ambush into my victory. Now I'd get answers, and they'd finally realize who they'd been hired to murder. I hauled the last of them Victor down the narrow basement steps, Toby following at my heel. The house still echoed with the aftermath of the short, brutal firefight. My heart pounded, sweat dampening my shirt. A nauseating mix of adrenaline and dread churned in my stomach. But I couldn't pause yet. Not until I got every piece of information I needed. Frank and Luis were already crumpled on the floor of the basement, wrists bound behind them, ankles lashed together. I'd marched them down one by one. Now it was Victor's turn. He resisted as much as he could, but the wound in his hand and the earlier blow to his head had stolen most of his fight. I forced him onto his knees beside the other two men. "Stay," I ordered Toby, gesturing for him to sit near the stairs. He obeyed, eyes alert. My dog's presence was a deterrent, too. Nobody wants an angry mutt snapping at them while they're cuffed. The overhead bulb cast harsh shadows on the men's faces, highlighting every bruise, every drop of sweat. Frank's eyes were wide with pain. Luis winced each time he breathed. Victor glared at me, fury etched into his features. "Hell of a welcome," he muttered. "Guess you're not just some random husband." I stood over them, arms folded, forcing myself to maintain a calm facade. Beneath that surface, my emotions raged. These men came here to end my life, but I also knew they weren't the masterminds behind this twisted plot. They were hired guns, tools for Oliver and Sophie's betrayal. Focus on what you need from them. Stepping to an old storage shelf, I grabbed a small handheld recorder, one of Quinn's parting gifts. I set it on a rickety table. "We're going to have a conversation," I said quietly, "and you're going to be honest." They exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Luis opened his mouth, grimaced. "We're not—" "Shut up," Victor snapped, still cradling his bandaged hand. "Don't say a word." I exhaled, leveling my gaze at Victor. "I have ways of making you talk, but I'd rather we keep this civilized." I lifted my shirt slightly, revealing the butt of my pistol. "You already learned I'm not bluffing. You're trapped here until I decide otherwise." Tension crackled in the room. Finally, Frank groaned. "Man, we got nothing to say. We were just—" "Just what?" I cut in, voice cold. "Following orders, collecting a paycheck?" My stomach churned at the thought. "You break into innocent people's homes and kill them for money?" No one answered. Their silence fanned the flames of my anger, but I had to control it, keep it measured. I pressed the power button on the recorder. Its tiny red light blinked to life. "Tell me about Oliver Spencer," I demanded, "and Sophie Willard. Why'd they hire you? What were the exact instructions?" Victor's glare turned defiant. "We got hired to handle a job. Don't matter who or why." I tapped the pistol. "It matters to me." He swallowed. Sweat beaded on his brow. "They said you had to go made it look like a robbery. That's all." My jaw clenched. Hearing it out loud felt like a punch to the gut, even though I already knew. For a moment, I saw Sophie's face in my mind, the way she used to smile at me. She wanted me dead, made it look like a robbery. My fingers tightened around the pistol grip, but I forced myself not to act on raw impulse. Not yet. "Give me specifics," I said, voice low. "How much were you paid? When did you meet Oliver?" Luis winced, but he spoke up this time. "Oliver wired us an advance 50 grand, the rest after the job was done. We met him at some warehouse once. Said he had an inside contact to your wife." He flinched at the venom in my gaze. "Look, man, it's just business." Those words hammered into my chest. Just business. My knuckles went white, a surge of fury threatening to erupt. I breathed in slowly. "You have any clue how messed up that is, taking lives for a paycheck?" Victor snorted. "We do what we're good at. You're not innocent either, are you?" "No regular guy fights back the way you did." His eyes swept over the improvised defenses around the basement. A few more cameras, some old gear I'd once used in a past I rarely talk about. I felt a chill. He's right, I thought grimly. I'm not innocent. But I pushed that aside. "Tell me everything Oliver told you about me," I demanded. "And I want details on Sophie's involvement." Frank, trembling, cleared his throat. Oliver said you were an ex-construction worker. Easy target if we broke in during the early morning. You'd probably be asleep. Your wife, Sophie, she'd be away. With an alibi. We get in, do you in, take some valuables to stage a robbery, and that's it. She gets the insurance." Hearing Sophie's name so casually linked to the plan hurt more than any bullet could. Toby whined softly, sensing my distress. Victor glared, features rigid. "Look, we didn't know you were some Rambo. This was supposed to be quick." I bit back a bitter laugh. Rambo, indeed. "Well, you underestimated me," I said. "Now you're going to help me expose Oliver." A flash of confusion crossed Luis's face. "Expose him? You think we're testifying or something? You're insane." I tapped the recorder again. "You'll talk, or I'll walk out of here, call the cops, and let them handle you as attempted murderers. Or worse, I could vanish, let you rot in some hole. Which option sounds better?" Silence. They exchanged glances, each man calculating his odds. Victor narrowed his eyes. Oliver's the one who set this up. Sophie fed him details about your schedule, your habits. That's all we know. We're not in the real estate business, man. It's enough, I snapped. You're going to confirm it on record. Names, amounts, method, everything. I thrust the recorder toward them. And you're going to clarify Sophie's role explicitly. Victor's jaw clenched, but finally he began speaking in a halting voice, recounting the times Oliver texted them, the hush-hush meetings, the day they were given the official go-ahead. Frank and Luis chimed in with their bits, describing how Sophie told Oliver I was blissfully ignorant. Each sentence felt like a knife twisting deeper, but I forced myself to keep recording. This is the evidence I need. Minutes later, I clicked off the recorder, my mind swirling. It was all there now, audio of hired killers confirming Oliver Spencer orchestrated everything with my wife's blessing. Proof I could later use if I played my cards right. Breathing heavily, I holstered my pistol. All right, I said. We're done here. Now you'll wait until I decide what happens next. A spark of fear flashed in Frank's eyes. Come on, man. We cooperated. We did what you asked. I nodded curtly. You did, and I'll keep that in mind. But you still broke into my house. You tried to kill me. Don't expect me to bake you cookies. Victor scowled. This is kidnapping. You realize that. Funny, I shot back. You're worried about my felony while you were about to commit murder. Spare me your moral high ground, buddy. Toby let out a short bark, as if echoing my impatience. I gestured for him to stay calm. Then I turned my attention back to the men. I'm going to find a way to use what you gave me, I said slowly. But first, I need to make a call. Leaving them bound on the cold basement floor, I climbed the steps, Toby padding after me. My arms still throbbed from the earlier graze. The bullet holes in the walls, shattered furniture, and the lingering smell of gunpowder reminded me how close I'd come to losing everything. In the kitchen, I grabbed my phone and dialed Quinn. He answered on the second ring, voice hushed. Andrew? Is it done? I closed my eyes, letting relief course through me. Yeah, I whispered. I've got them tied up in my basement. They confessed on tape. A low whistle came from the other end. Damn, you don't do anything halfway. You're sure you're safe? For now, I replied. But next up is Oliver and Sophie. They set this in motion. They'll be expecting me to show up dead any minute. My throat tightened. I need you to help me broadcast what I've got. Send me the recordings, Quinn said. I'll work my magic. My gaze drifted across the wreckage of the living room. Broken lamps, bullet holes in the walls, Toby's paw prints tracking blood from the intruders. I'm about to cause them the biggest headache of their lives, I whispered. Quinn's voice hardened. Let's make it happen. Send me the files. I'll prep a timed release. Then we handle Oliver's empire from the digital side. Ending the call, I took a shaky breath. Down in the basement, 3 mercenaries were bound and injured, cursing their luck. Above them, in a real estate office somewhere, Oliver Spencer likely waited for the call confirming my demise. And Sophie, my wife, would soon realize her unsuspecting husband had turned the tables. Gently, I ran my hand along Toby's back. You're a good boy, I said hoarsely. Now let's show them what they get for thinking I was an easy target. Later that same morning, once the sun had risen fully, I was pacing the hallway, phone in hand, Toby anxiously following at my heels. The 3 men remained bound in the basement. Victor had tried once to wriggle free, but I tightened the restraints, leaving him with no hope of an easy escape. Now all they could do was wait, hiss curses, and occasionally moan in pain. I'd bandaged any serious wounds so they wouldn't bleed out, but my sympathy was limited. They were alive. That was more than they'd planned for me. My phone buzzed Quinn. I'm logged in, he said briskly. You sending the files now? I stepped into the living room surveying the destruction. Glass shards crunched underfoot. Yeah, hold on. With a few taps, I uploaded the digital recordings and the men's confessions short but damning to a secure drive Quinn had set up. While the files transferred, I couldn't help thinking how bizarre it was to rely on technology to unravel a real estate mogul's empire. But Oliver was vulnerable online, especially with Quinn's hacking talents. and from the confessions I'd just obtained, I had enough ammunition to bury him. Got him, Quinn said after a moment. Solid recordings. 1 second I'll line these up with the other Intel financial records, internal emails, texts about the robbery gone wrong. We'll create a comprehensive doc that's impossible to ignore. My pulse throbbed. Are you releasing it now? Not yet. First, we'll go for a calculated leak. We want Oliver to sweat, then blow everything wide open with maximum impact. Maybe an initial post to social media, then let the press pick it up. That'll set the stage for your wife's involvement to come out. I swallowed, heart twisting. Hearing Sophie labeled as my wife felt surreal. Fine, I said hoarsely. I'll stand by. Let me know if you need anything more. A pause on the line. And Andrew, good job staying alive. But watch yourself, Oliver's no doubt waiting for an update from his hitmen. When he doesn't hear from them, he might start calling in backup. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm ready for whatever he sends. By mid-morning, Quinn had posted a cryptic anonymous file on a social platform known for whistleblower leaks. It contained partial evidence of Oliver's fraudulent real estate dealings enough to stir gossip, but not the full exposé. Meanwhile, Quinn gave me a real-time feed of Oliver's internal communications. Watching on my phone, I saw frantic emails and texts flying between Oliver's board members. They demanded explanations for suspicious bank transactions. Some threatened to resign or report him. Others tried calling Oliver, who seemed to be ignoring them. My guess? He was still expecting word that I'd been removed, and he couldn't focus on damage control until that was confirmed. A small, grim smile tugged at my lips. Let him spiral. He'd soon realize his mercenaries had been neutralized. Then he'd panic, and that's when Quinn would drop the bigger bomb. The audio of the assassins detailing Oliver's arrangement with Sophie. That's the plan, I reminded myself, pacing the hallway again. Destroy his business first, then reveal the murder plot. Around noon, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. A man's voice hissed through the line, tight with anger. Where the hell are my guys? I froze, adrenaline spiking. Oliver. He must have gotten this number from somewhere, or he was calling the hitmen's phones, which I'd confiscated. I forced my voice steady. They're indisposed. Who's this? A short, bitter laugh. You know damn well who. Put Victor on, or any of them, now. I let out a slow breath, noticing Toby watching me with alert eyes. They can't talk, I replied, keeping my tone clipped. They're a little tied up. Expletive, Oliver snarled. Who is this? I almost wanted to gloat, but I knew better. The man you tried to kill, I said calmly. The one who's still breathing. Silence, punctuated by a faint static. Then Oliver's voice dropped to a furious whisper. How is that possible? Turns out I'm not so easy to take out, I said. My mind burned with images of his arrogance, his smooth confidence when he'd planned my execution. Your men are alive, no thanks to you, but they're not going anywhere. Oliver cursed again. I pictured him pacing some pristine office, probably running a hand through his expensive haircut. Then he spat, I'll find them. And you. This isn't over. Actually, I said, it is. And I hung up, heart pounding. Let him stew. He was no doubt panicking now, uncertain how much I knew, whether I'd go to the police. Meanwhile, Quinn's partial leak kept intensifying the pressure on his business, a 1-2 punch to the gut. Barely 5 minutes after I ended the call, my phone rang again. This time it was Sophie's number. My chest tightened. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. Andrew, she said in a breathless voice, have you seen the news? People are talking about Oliver accusations, money laundering claims. He's freaking out, okay? He says he can't reach his associates. Her words came in panicked bursts. My stomach twisted. She sounded truly shaken. Should I confront her now? The outline was clear. I wanted Oliver fully exposed first. But hearing her fear, knowing she was scrambling, it stirred conflicting emotions in me. I forced my tone cold. Is that so? I murmured. Maybe you should ask Oliver what's going on. She exhaled shakily. Andrew, please, are you okay? You sound different. An ironic laugh nearly escaped my lips. She wanted me dead last night, and now she's worried about my tone? I'm fine, I said shortly. Just tired. Sophie hesitated. Listen, I might go out of town for a bit, just until this blows over. Oliver told me there's some business issues. I don't want to get dragged into it. My jaw clenched. Running away, huh? Her breath hitched. It's not like that, she stammered. I'll call you later, okay? I hung up without responding. My chest felt tight, as though a vice gripped my lungs. Toby nudged my leg with his muzzle, sensing my distress. It's okay, I whispered, rubbing his ears. But it wasn't okay. Sophie's panic calls only reminded me how twisted everything had become. By early evening, Quinn told me the board members had scheduled an emergency meeting. Some had threatened legal action. Others demanded Oliver step down. Meanwhile, the partial leak had spread across local news blogs and social media, fueling speculation that Oliver was on the verge of a criminal scandal. Internet sleuths posted screenshots, linking his shell companies to suspicious property deals. I stood in what remained of my living room, phone in one hand, pistol in the other, occasionally checking on the men in the basement via a camera feed. They were still bound, exhausted, and sullen. No real sign of them escaping. Quinn's voice crackled over the call. Are you ready for the next step? I glanced at Toby, who lay with his chin on his paws, eyes half-lidded but alert. Yeah, I said. Post it all. Let the world see. All right, Quinn said, excitement stirring in his voice. I'm uploading the assassin confessions, the timelines, Oliver's text records with your wife, the insurance policy details everything. Give it a half hour and watch the explosion. Nerves prickled my skin. This was the moment of no return. Once that evidence went public, Oliver's real estate empire would be in freefall, and Sophie's involvement would be laid bare. She wanted a clean kill for the insurance money. She's about to get the exact opposite. Andrew, Quinn added quietly, you sure about this? This will ruin Sophie's life, too. I blinked, bitterness flaring. Ruin her life? She'd tried to end mine. She made her choice, I replied, voice hollow. I ended the call and flipped on the local news. The TV's volume turned low. My stomach felt knotted, torn between vengeance and sorrow. Toby settled at my feet, still exuding that quiet canine comfort. As minutes passed, I saw the news anchor's expression shift mid-segment. Breaking alerts flashed on-screen, major real estate CEO alleged in widespread financial fraud. Then more details trickled in. Sources from an anonymous leak claiming Oliver Spencer hired hitmen for a murder plot. My phone vibrated nonstop with messages from Quinn, updates from local journalists trying to confirm the story. I only half read them, too consumed by the live coverage. The anchor's voice quivered with shock. If these allegations hold any truth, this is a massive scandal. A photo of Oliver flashed across the screen, then a grainy screenshot from the leaked confessions. My breath caught as I saw Sophie's name in subtitles. Sophie Willard authorized. She gave us details. Insurance money. There it was, for the whole city to see. My phone rang Sophie again, probably in full panic now. I watched it vibrate on the kitchen counter, ignoring it. Let her face the consequences. Toby lifted his head, ears perked as if asking if I was going to answer. Not now, I murmured to him. Within 10 minutes, social media was ablaze. Hashtags about Oliver's shady dealings trended locally. Anonymous accounts reposted Quinn's compiled files, screenshots of text messages, voice snippets from the basement confessions. At the anchor's desk, the station scrambled to keep up, promising a special report at prime time. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching events unfold from a distance. The men in my basement had triggered the catalyst, but it was Oliver's arrogance and Sophie's betrayal that truly fueled the explosion. My phone kept buzzing a half-dozen calls from unknown numbers, maybe reporters sniffing out a statement. I let them all go to voicemail. Finally, I inhaled. It's done, I whispered, turning the TV off. Toby tilted his head. We did it, I repeated, voice hollow. This was the big reveal, the digital bomb. The city was reeling. Oliver's empire was crashing. Sophie's name dragged through the mud, and I still had 3 battered hitmen downstairs waiting for my next move. I glanced around the trashed living room, bullet holes and debris a testament to the short, violent fight. My arm throbbed from the graze. The adrenaline had left me shaky, exhausted. Yet a grim satisfaction settled over me. They wanted a perfect crime. Instead, they faced a perfect downfall. The phone buzzed one more time. This time it was Quinn, I answered, breath unsteady. "You see this?" he asked, laughter in his voice. "They're going nuts. Oliver's board is apparently having a meltdown. Cops might even show up at his office soon." "Good," I said quietly. "That's exactly what I wanted." "What about Sophie?" I stared at the floor, Toby pressing closer to me. "She'll face it too," I murmured, swallowing hard. "No one's above consequences, Quinn." Silence from the line. Then Quinn cleared his throat. "All right, I'll keep monitoring. If anything big happens, I'll alert you." Ending the call, I tucked my phone in my pocket. I was at the center of a storm I'd created, and the eye of that storm felt eerily calm. The big question, what comes next, hovered in my mind. But I pushed that aside. For now, I just had to maintain control. Looking down at Toby, I stroked his fur. "Time to finish what we started," I whispered. In the basement, 3 criminals waited, battered but alive. Soon enough, the authorities would home in on Oliver, and Sophie might try to deny everything. Let them try. I had all the evidence. And if they sent more muscle, they'd find I wasn't done fighting. The evening sky turned a bruised purple, thunderheads gathering at the horizon. I stood by the window, phone in hand, watching news vans zoom past on the street below. They weren't here for me yet, but they were scouring the neighborhood, hoping for a hot lead on Oliver Spencer's location. Half the city seemed transfixed by the scandal. A second news alert popped up on my phone. "Authorities converge on Spencer's real estate office," it read. My heart gave a fierce jolt. This was Quinn's final step. The cops had presumably received an avalanche of tips, some from me and Quinn, others from Oliver's own board members eager to avoid going down with him. Once the police arrived, they'd find plenty of damning evidence. I flicked off the TV, couldn't bear to see more talk show hosts speculating about the murder-for-hire twist. I had my own part to play. I typed up one more anonymous email, forwarding the basement confessions to a local detective's address, a secure lead that would cut through any media sensationalism. Then I wiped my phone's history, covering my tracks. Outside, thunder rumbled softly. Toby paced in the living room, clearly picking up on my tension. My arms felt heavy, and the ache from my forearm wound flared every time I moved too quickly. But my mind was fixed on the goal. Ensure Oliver and Sophie had no escape route. My phone buzzed again, Sophie. A part of me wanted to let it ring, but I pressed answer, voice clipped. "What?" "Andrew," she said, voice trembling. "I'm at Oliver's office, or I was. The cops showed up. They're arresting people, confiscating computers. I barely got out." I pictured her huddled somewhere, phone in hand, eyes wide as the life she'd built with Oliver imploded. "So you ran," I said, bitterness seeping in. Shocking. She took a shaky breath. "What's happening? Why are they saying there's a murder plot? Did someone leak this?" My fingers curled into my palm. "You think no one would find out? You thought you'd just collect insurance money and vanish?" A tense silence. When Sophie spoke again, her voice wavered. "Andrew, I don't know what you're talking about. I never wanted—" "Save it!" I snapped. "I heard it all, Sophie. I have recordings of you and Oliver plotting my death. Don't lie." Her breath caught, a muffled sob escaping. We didn't know, we thought, look. Oliver said it'd be easy. You wouldn't feel a thing. I was desperate, My heart twisted in anger and sorrow. Wouldn't feel a thing. "Enough," I hissed. "We're done. The cops are after Oliver. They'll come for you too, once they have the full story. Unless you want to turn yourself in first." A stifled cry. "Andrew, please, I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can fix this." Thunder cracked overhead, the lights flickering in the house. Toby let out a low growl, unsettled by the noise. "No, Sophie," I said, voice trembling. "We can't fix it. You sold me out, and now it's your turn to face the consequences." I ended the call before she could reply. My hand shook so badly I had to set the phone down, leaning against the wall. Toby nudged my calf, offering silent comfort. Outside, the wind picked up, rain spattering against the windows. A half hour passed, filled with the rumble of thunder and the staccato patter of rain. Then my phone lit up with an alert from Quinn. Oliver's in custody. Police swarmed his office. Some of his staff gave him up. They might be heading your way next. I exhaled, feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension. Oliver was arrested good, but the police might be curious about the center of this conspiracy, me. Would they suspect me of vigilante acts? Probably. That's why I'd carefully left an evidence trail pointing to Oliver and Sophie, with minimal focus on how exactly I'd defended myself. As I was pondering my next move, headlights swept across the street. A couple of unmarked police cars rolled up. My heart jolted. They're here. Toby stood, ears pricking, sensing something was up. "Stay calm, boy," I murmured, snagging the pistol from the couch. I wasn't about to shoot any cops, obviously, but I wasn't going to greet them empty-handed either. Footsteps pounded on the porch, followed by a firm knock at the door. "Police! Open up!" I ran a hand through my hair, pulse hammering. "You wanted justice," I reminded myself. Now it's here. Tucking the pistol into my waistband, I cracked the door. Two plainclothes detectives stood under the porch light, rain dripping from their coats. Toby barked once, then fell silent. "Andrew Willard?" one detective asked, eyes narrowed. I nodded, stepping back to let them in. "Yes, I've been expecting you." They exchanged a glance. The second detective, a woman with sharp eyes, spotted the bullet holes in the wall. "What happened here?" I swallowed. "Someone tried to kill me." "Three men, hired by Oliver Spencer." I hesitated, then added softly, "They're in my basement, alive." The first detective's brow shot up. "You have them here?" I nodded. "They broke in. I defended myself, tied them up." Toby nudged my leg and I gestured for him to stay put. The detectives looked uneasy, but followed me through the trashed living room, hands hovering near their holsters. I led them to the basement door, flipping on the overhead light. Downstairs, Victor, Frank, and Luis were still bound, looking miserable. As soon as they saw the detectives, their eyes darted with panic. "Finally," Luis croaked. "Get us out of here. He's crazy." The female detective's gaze swept over the scene chairs, supplies, the men's injuries. Then she turned to me, suspicion clouding her features. "And you just happened to subdue 3 armed intruders on your own?" I felt a stab of unease. "I have certain self-defense skills." Understatement of the year. "They shot first. I only did what I had to do." Victor spat on the floor. "He ambushed us. That wasn't self-defense. That was a damn trap." My jaw clenched, but I bit back a retort. The detectives radioed for backup, calling in uniforms to secure the suspects. Within minutes, more officers poured into my living room, stepping gingerly around shattered glass and bullet casings. Toby stayed at my side, low growl humming in his throat at the sudden chaos. One officer read Victor, Frank, and Luis their rights, while medics checked their wounds. Another asked me to step aside for questioning. We relocated to the hallway, out of earshot of the basement scene. The female detective, who introduced herself as Detective Sarah Coleman, flipped open a notepad. "Mr. Willard, we have reason to believe Oliver Spencer orchestrated a murder-for-hire scheme," she began, eyes locked on me. "We've recovered partial evidence from digital leaks. Now we show up, and you've got 3 men hogtied in your basement. That's quite a picture." My throat tightened. "I know how it looks, but I had no choice. They forced entry, tried to kill me. If you check your logs, you'll see multiple anonymous tips, evidence linking them to Oliver." She nodded slowly, pen scratching across the page. "You'll need to come to the station. We'll sort out the details." Toby whined, ears drooping. I looked down, feeling a pang. "I can't leave Toby alone. He's all I've got left." Coleman's gaze softened slightly. "We can figure out arrangements. But, Mr. Willard, we have to process the crime scene. You understand we need to question you about vigilantism, possible excessive force. The bullet holes alone suggest a firefight." I swallowed. She was doing her job, which could complicate my plans. But Quinn had prepared me for this, making sure the evidence trail firmly laid blame on Oliver and Sophie. "Stay calm," I told myself. "All right," I said quietly. "I'll cooperate, but let me get Toby's leash. He's old, and I don't want him upset." She nodded, watching me closely. "We'll handle your dog carefully." Outside, thunder boomed, lightning illuminating the street. Police cars formed a line, lights flashing against the dark sky. Neighbors peeked from windows, curtains twitching. The entire block had become a scene of official urgency. My house, once a quiet suburban home, now a crime scene teeming with law enforcement. As I clipped the leash onto Toby's collar, a fresh wave of exhaustion hit me. Oliver's plan had collapsed, and Sophie's betrayal was out in the open. The hired men were in custody. I was alive, yes, but everything else lay in ruins. The next steps would be a tangle of police reports, legal maneuvers, media frenzy. Detective Coleman cleared her throat. Ready? I looked at the living room one last time, bullet-riddled walls, broken lamps, evidence of a war waged in secret. Then I nodded, guiding Toby outside. The night air felt electric, rain spattering against my face. My pulse pounded in my ears, the weight of the last 24 hours bearing down on me. At least one thing was certain. Oliver was done, Sophie was exposed, and the men hired to kill me were under arrest. They might spin the story any way they could, but the truth was out. And for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a flicker of vindication, even if my future now stood in a murky light. As I slid into the back of an unmarked squad car, Toby beside me, I rested my head against the seat, letting the siren's distant wail mix with the thunder. Betrayal had reached its bitter end. Now, only the aftermath remained. When I finally stepped off the long-distance bus, I found myself on a dusty roadside in a part of the country I'd never set foot in before. Rolling hills stretched in every direction, dotted with shrubs and the occasional weathered barn. The sky, a pale gray, threatened rain. Toby hopped down after me, panting. His nails clicked on the cracked asphalt. A small wooden sign nearby read, "Welcome to Crescent Plains." I'd chosen this place for two reasons. One, it was tucked far from the city that had nearly devoured me. Two, nobody here asked questions. At least, that was my hope. Quinn had helped me craft a basic new identity. James Nolan and I carried the necessary paperwork in a battered duffel bag. All I had to do was live quietly, keep my head down, and try to patch together the shattered remains of my life. The nearest building resembled a diner, with peeling paint and a neon open sign that flickered erratically. I swallowed the lump in my throat and trudged toward it, Toby heeling at my side. I still wore the weight of everything that happened: Sophie's betrayal, Oliver's arrest, the chaos of my final days in the old house. Though the police had questioned me, I'd managed to slip away once Quinn finalized the paperwork for my exit. Now I felt like a traveler drifting between worlds. Inside the diner, a lone waitress with curly hair wiped down the counter. She looked up, startled by Toby's presence, but forced a polite smile. "Hi there," she said, voice echoing in the nearly empty space. "You, need a seat?" "Just a coffee," I replied, trying to keep my tone casual. The place smelled of frying oil and cheap disinfectant. Toby sniffed the air. She gestured. "Take any booth. We're not exactly busy." Then she frowned at Toby. "No pets allowed, strictly speaking, but you can keep him by your feet. Nobody's around to complain." I flashed a brief, grateful nod. "Thanks." Sliding into a corner booth, I felt Toby settle under the table. My shoulders ached from lugging my duffel. James Nolan, I reminded myself, letting the name roll around in my mind. A new name for a new start. While the waitress prepared the coffee, I stared through the diner's dusty window. The bus had already pulled away, leaving me stranded with no ride, no real plan beyond hide. But maybe that was enough. I needed somewhere to breathe, somewhere to let the guilt and heartbreak run their course. When the waitress returned, placing a chipped mug in front of me, she asked, "You just passing through?" I hesitated, sipping the hot coffee. It was bitter and burnt. "Maybe," I lied. "Looking for a quiet place. Thought I'd see if there's any rentals in town." She shrugged. "Crescent Plains is quiet, all right. Most folks here are older or they've lived here forever. We do get the occasional newcomer, but not often." I nodded, keeping my answers vague. In my past life, I might have conjured an elaborate cover story. Now I just wanted enough privacy to figure myself out. Toby thumped his tail once under the table, reassuring me with his presence. The waitress introduced herself as Kara, pointing me to a bulletin board near the diner's entrance. Yellowed index cards advertised local jobs, second-hand furniture, and a few rooms for rent. My eyes locked onto a notice. Small guest cabin, quiet, scenic. $300/month. Call Rita. A phone number was scrawled in pen. I jotted it down. Thanks, Kara, I said softly. Toby's ears perked at her name, making her grin. She bent to scratch behind his ears. She asked no further questions, and I left a few dollars for the coffee before stepping back into the humid afternoon. The sense of emptiness around me felt oddly soothing. Here, no one whispered my old name. No one gawked at me like a living scandal. Just farmland, a handful of old shops, and the hush of an overcast sky. I found a payphone by the roadside, a relic in a world that had moved on to smartphones. Pulling out a few coins, I dialed the number from the bulletin. An older woman answered on the second ring, voice warm yet cautious. "Hello, this is Rita." I cleared my throat. "Hi, I saw your listing for a cabin. I just got in, looking for a place to stay." She paused. "You new to Crescent Plains?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a polite tone. "Name's James. James Nolan. I'm looking for something quiet, month to month if possible." Rita considered. "I do have a small cabin near my property line. Not fancy, but it has basic amenities. If you're not picky, we can talk details in person." Relief stirred in my chest. "That sounds perfect. Where can I find you?" She gave me directions about a 1.5-mile walk, near a gravel road named Willow Creek Lane. I thanked her, hung up, and rubbed the back of my neck. Toby sat patiently at my feet, tail wagging once. "Guess we have a lead, buddy." Half an hour later, I followed a winding path through overgrown fields. The humidity clung to my skin. Toby panted, nose to the ground, occasionally pausing to sniff at rabbit holes or patches of wildflowers. Finally, we reached a modest farmhouse with a wraparound porch. A short woman in jeans and boots stood waiting, arms crossed. Rita. She greeted me with a nod, glancing at Toby but saying nothing about him. Her gray hair was pulled back, accentuating sharp eyes that seemed to read me like a book. "You James?" she asked. "That's me," I replied, offering a handshake. She hesitated, then shook once, firmly. "Cabin's this way," she said, leading me down a dirt path. "I'm not big on paperwork, but I do expect rent on time. I keep to myself, you do the same. That agreeable?" I exhaled. "Absolutely." The cabin was a tiny structure at the edge of a line of trees. Wooden steps led up to a small porch. Inside, it smelled of dust and old wood. A single main room served as a living area with a corner kitchen. A separate door revealed a cramped bathroom. No TV, no Wi-Fi, a bed in the corner with a thin mattress. Sparse, but all I needed. Rita watched me take it in. "Power works? Well, water's decent. Got a small heater for winter. That suit you?" I set my duffel on the floor, Toby sniffing around the furniture. "Yes, ma'am," I said softly. "I'll pay a month up front." She eyed me, curiosity flickering. "You, on the run or something?" My spine tensed. "No, just needed a change of scenery." The old me might have offered a glib cover story, but I sensed Rita didn't want details. She wanted to ensure I wouldn't cause trouble. "I can give references if necessary." She waved a hand dismissively. "Long as you don't skip rent or bring drama here, we're fine." Then she handed me a key from her pocket. "Lock's old, but it works. I'll come by tomorrow with some clean sheets." "Thank you," I murmured, meaning it. Then she turned and headed out, leaving me alone with Toby in the quiet cabin. A sense of relief washed through me, relief that we had a roof, that for now, no one was prying into my past. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood outside the cabin with Toby, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. The day's heat gave way to a gentle breeze. Somewhere in the distance, cows lowed and a few crickets started their nightly chorus. Leaning against the porch railing, I let memories swirl. The final confrontation with Sophie's hired men, the bullet holes in my old house, the betrayal that shattered everything. My chest ached. Should I feel victorious? Instead, I felt hollow. Sophie was arrested, Oliver's empire crumbled, and I'd slipped away under a new name. But the cost was enormous. I'd lost the life I thought I had, the woman I once loved, and the sense of safety in my own skin. Toby pressed his nose to my hand, sensing my sorrow. I knelt, hugging him around the neck. "We'll figure this out," I whispered, eyes stinging. "One day at a time, right?" He wagged his tail softly, a silent promise of loyalty. That was one thing Sophie could never fake, this dog's unwavering faith in me. A pang of anger coursed through me at how she'd nearly robbed me of Toby too, but anger alone wouldn't heal me. I had to find a new path. The ghost of Andrew Willard, ex-IA, ex-husband, would have to fade into James Nolan, quiet tenant in a dusty corner of America. With a shaky sigh, I guided Toby inside, flipping on the single overhead light. The cabin was warm, the air thick with the scent of old wood. Setting out a bowl of water for Toby, I sank onto the rickety bed. The mattress squeaked, and a swirl of dust rose in the lamplight. As darkness settled, I stared at the plank ceiling, listening to Toby lap water, then curl up at my feet. My eyes drifted shut, though sleep remained elusive. One day at a time, I told myself again, echoing the mantra learned in old battlefields. Survive first, rebuild later. Eventually, exhaustion took over. In the hush, with only crickets and Toby's soft breathing to keep me company, I fell into a restless doze. For the first time in weeks, no footsteps threatened outside my door, no mercenaries waited in the shadows, just a quiet farmland, an old cabin, and the promise of tomorrow. The next morning, dawn light seeped through the cabin's single window, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. I woke feeling stiff, my back protesting the thin mattress. Toby stirred, stretching lazily. He gave me a quick, hopeful wag of his tail, food on his mind, probably. I dug into my bag for a few essentials Quinn had managed to set me up with. Some basic groceries, a couple cans of dog food, and a small envelope of cash. After feeding Toby, I heated a mug of instant coffee on the cabin's tiny stove. The bitter scent reminded me of old stakeouts, the taste of waiting and watching. At least now, I wasn't waiting for danger, just trying to figure out how to live again. Late that morning, I ventured out to a small convenience store about a mile from Rita's property. Toby trotted beside me, tongue lolling. We passed fields of grazing cattle and quiet farmland. Part of me felt a pang, missing the anonymity of city crowds. Here, any new face would stand out. But I had no choice except to adapt. The store turned out to be a converted gas station with a single pump. A lone clerk in a baseball cap stood behind the counter. He offered me a polite nod as I browsed for bread and canned goods. While I inspected the shelves, a small TV in the corner blared static-laced news coverage. My stomach twisted when I caught a glimpse of Oliver Spencer's name scrolling across the screen. Next to it, words like fraud, arrest, and scandal. I froze, heart pounding, half afraid my face might pop up next. Toby sensed my tension, leaning against my leg. The clerk noticed me staring and cleared his throat. "Wild story, huh?" he said, tapping the TV. "Some big-shot real estate guy in the city turned out to be crooked as a dog's hind leg. Even talk of a murder-for-hire plot. Crazy times." I forced a casual shrug. Yeah, the world's nuts. I grabbed a loaf of bread, hoping he wouldn't ask more. My breath felt shallow. Of course, news would travel this far eventually. The clerk didn't pry. He just shook his head at the TV. "Sure makes me glad I'm out here in the sticks where none of that drama happens." Then he rang up my items, gave Toby a quick smile, and waved me off. Once outside, I let out a long exhale. Oliver's downfall had become a national curiosity, apparently. But my name wasn't plastered on the headlines yet. Maybe Quinn managed to keep me out of the spotlight. For how long, though? The thought gnawed at me as Toby and I trudged back toward the cabin. That evening, after a simple dinner, I stepped onto the porch with Toby, gazing at the endless stretch of farmland. Fireflies bobbed among the tall grass. The air felt heavy with the promise of a storm. I told myself I should relish this peace, but old habits died hard. My mind kept drifting to Sophie in jail, Oliver behind bars, and the unshakable guilt that I'd once truly loved her. Midnight found me unable to sleep. Toby dozed near my feet, but I tossed and turned, haunted by fragmented dreams. Me standing in our old living room, bullet holes riddling the walls, Sophie's voice echoing, "It has to look like a robbery." I jolted awake, heart racing, chest tight as if the betrayal was fresh. Turning on the small lamp, I rummaged through my duffel for any kind of distraction. My hand brushed a photograph one I'd tucked away subconsciously. It showed Toby as a puppy, clumsy paws on my lap, Sophie kneeling next to us with a genuine smile. My throat tightened. Why did I keep this? A part of me wanted to rip it up. Another part couldn't let go of the memory that once things were good. I tucked the photo back, forcing myself to breathe. That Sophie is gone, I reminded myself. She died the moment she plotted my murder for an insurance payout. The woman in the photo was just a ghost. In the following days, I settled into a quiet routine. I woke early, took Toby for walks along gravel roads, then returned to the cabin to tinker with small carpentry projects. I'd purchased some boards and basic tools with my limited funds, figuring I could fix up the cabin a bit, maybe earn favor with Rita. She stopped by once, dropping off fresh sheets as promised. She observed my half-finished attempts at building a new porch step. "You do construction work, James?" I paused, wiping sweat from my brow. "Something like that. Used to do odd jobs back home." She offered a curt nod. "Well, I appreciate the improvements. Just don't burn the place down." A wry smile tugged at my lips. "I'll do my best." She nodded again and left, leaving me alone with Toby's curious gaze. "Just don't burn the place down," she'd said. That about summed it up, didn't it? My life was a smoldering wreck before. Maybe now I could prevent further ruin. Occasionally, I overheard talk in the diner or the convenience store about Oliver's upcoming hearings. Word was that bail had been set high, but some legal entanglements might slow the trial. People spoke of Sophie's name as well, his mistress or accomplice or both, they gossiped. My stomach knotted every time I caught a snippet, but no one recognized me as the victim. I was just a stranger in Crescent Plains, James Nolan, presumably passing through. One afternoon, an older man in the diner brought up the scandal to Kara while I sipped coffee in my corner booth. "That Oliver fella's got a mean streak from what the news says. Had a wife too, but she's MIA. Then there's a second woman in custody. It's a mess." I kept my gaze on my newspaper, forcing my heart to stay calm. The mentions of wife MIA, second woman in custody, all jumbled together. They got details wrong, I thought. Typical media confusion. But the mention stung, reminding me how twisted the story had become. Sophie was no longer my wife, or was she, legally? The betrayal overshadowed any definition. Toby's comfort nighttime often brought the worst of my memories, so I found solace in Toby's unwavering presence. We'd sit outside, watching the sky fade from pink to deep indigo, crickets and frogs creating a lullaby. Sometimes I'd tell Toby about random nothings my days walk, a stray cat he'd barked at. He'd just tilt his head, offering acceptance I felt I didn't deserve. Late one night, as we lingered on the porch, a shooting star streaked across the sky. I made a silent wish. Peace. I just wanted peace, no more waking nightmares, no more guilt for the brutal confrontation in my old home. Toby rested his chin on my shoe as if sensing my silent plea. It dawned on me that while I'd physically escaped the city, the past still lurked in every shadow. I didn't regret surviving or exposing Oliver, but I couldn't shake the heaviness that came from how it all went down. Yet, in Crescent Plains, no one expected me to be more than a quiet newcomer, and maybe that anonymity was the first step to healing, if healing was even possible. By the end of the week, a small shift occurred. I found myself planning simple tasks for the next day, mending a loose plank on the cabin's roof, shopping for groceries, maybe exploring a local trail. Mundane, but it signaled that a new routine was emerging, one not governed by betrayal and violence, but by the desire to keep going. I felt pangs of guilt for leaving behind a chaos I helped create. But with Oliver in jail and Sophie facing her own charges, there was little for me to do. Quinn sent me occasional text updates on a prepaid phone. "Media coverage is insane. People want a trial date. I'm safe. Are you okay?" I'd respond with short messages. "I'm fine, taking it day by day." That was all the truth I could manage. At night, I sometimes dreamt of the final look on Sophie's face when she realized I'd beaten her plan. But each morning, Toby's quiet optimism nudged me out of bed, reminding me I was alive. For now, that was enough. So I carried on, each slow day blending into the next, the hush of the countryside a balm to my ragged soul. In that quiet, I began to realize that no matter how deep the betrayal cut, I had the capacity to keep moving, step by uncertain step, into a future unknown but mine to shape. When Rita knocked on my door one morning, Toby let out a single bark. I tensed, half expecting bad news, but it was just her, holding a small box of supplies. "Thought you could use these," she said, handing me nails, a hammer, and some spare wood scraps. "They've been sitting in my barn for ages." Her generosity startled me. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "I'll put them to good use." She nodded, stepping back. "Listen, James, I'm heading to a livestock auction next weekend. If you're around, you can ride along. Might pick up a few side jobs if you're handy with repairs. Farmers always need help." I hesitated. The idea of mingling with locals felt risky, but I needed some form of income beyond what I had stashed. "I'd appreciate that," I said, forcing a small smile. The following evening, while I replaced a broken porch step at the cabin, a battered pickup truck rumbled down the dirt path. Out stepped a tall man with sun-worn skin and a warm grin. Toby barked once, then trotted over, tail wagging in cautious greeting. The man tipped his baseball cap. "Heard from Rita you're good with tools. Name's Frank Martinez. I manage a ranch a few miles south. Need someone to fix a collapsed fence." A flicker of nerves. "James Nolan," I replied, extending a hand. "I can take a look." Frank studied me. "You from around here?" "Not really, just needed a quiet place." It was my standard line now. He didn't pry, just nodded. "Life's simpler in Crescent Plains, that's for sure. Let's see if you can handle a fence job. Pays decently, plus you get a meal out of it." Toby wagged his tail, as if encouraging me to accept. The thought of extra cash, plus a bit of neighborly interaction, sealed my decision. "All right, I'm in." A day later, Frank drove me out to his ranch, rolling green pastures with a few dozen cattle grazing. Toby hopped out eagerly, sniffing around the fence line. The damage was worse than I'd anticipated. A fallen tree had crashed onto the wooden posts. We spent hours sawing away branches, digging out rotted posts, hammering new boards into place. Amid the dusty labor, Frank chatted amicably about ranch life. He told me about calving seasons, hay bales, and local fairs. I listened, absorbing the calm normalcy of it all. Now and then, Toby barked at a distant squirrel, making Frank laugh. "Your dog's lively," he remarked. I ruffled Toby's fur. "He's been with me through thick and thin." That was all the detail I gave, but Frank didn't press. Instead, he offered me a cold soda from a cooler and asked if I'd done farm work before. I shrugged. "Used to do construction in the city. This is simpler in a good way." Frank nodded. "I get it. City hustle can wear you down. Out here, we just do what needs doing." A lump formed in my throat. He had no idea how battered I'd been by that city hustle, how close I came to losing my life. But I was grateful for his acceptance. By late afternoon, we'd repaired the fence, Toby trotting alongside us, tail wagging with every hammered nail. Frank paid me cash on the spot more than I expected. "Your work's solid," he said. "If you want more side gigs, let me know." I tucked the bills into my pocket, feeling a surge of relief. A little financial cushion meant Toby and I could stay put a while longer. "Thank you," I murmured. "I appreciate it." Over the next week, a slow pattern emerged. I'd wake up, feed Toby, then walk into town or hitch a ride with Frank to tackle small jobs, barn repairs, chicken coop fixes, the occasional rundown porch. Word spread among a handful of locals that James was reliable and quiet, happy to do honest labor for a fair price. One afternoon, I returned to the cabin to find a small container of homemade cookies on my doorstep, a note reading, "Welcome to Crescent Plains, Kara." Toby sniffed the container eagerly. I smiled for the first time in ages, touched by the kindness. In the city, neighbors rarely left treats for each other. But here, trust formed slowly yet steadily, built on small gestures. Rita, for her part, remained watchful but kind. She'd occasionally check in, telling me about local events or hearing if someone needed a handyman. Once she mentioned a rumor that Oliver Spencer's trial might begin soon, but I feigned indifference. My chest still tightened at the thought, but I kept my mask intact, just a tenant paying rent on time, fixing the property bit by bit. Despite the budding sense of belonging, I couldn't shake an undercurrent of anxiety. What if someone recognized me from a news segment or a leaked photograph? Quinn had assured me he'd minimized references to my face or personal details, but the risk remained. Every time I entered the diner, I'd scan the patrons, half expecting a suspicious glance. One day, Kara approached my booth with a sly grin. "You know, James, I hear you're handy. My sister's screen door is busted. Mind taking a look? She'll pay." "Sure," I said, but the tension in my neck never fully left. Each new request was a step deeper into this community. If the truth ever emerged, how would they react? The fear coiled in my gut, but Toby's quiet presence by my side helped me keep calm. On a mild afternoon, I discovered a small stream behind Rita's farmland. Toby romped in the shallow water, splashing happily while I sat on a fallen log. The place had a serene, beauty sunlight dancing across the rippling surface, birds chirping overhead. In that moment, I almost forgot I was a fugitive from my old life. I let my thoughts wander to Sophie, wondering how she fared in custody. Did she regret her choices, or cling to the idea that she could outrun them? A hollow ache spread in my chest at the memory of her face. We'd once talked about adopting another dog, having kids maybe. All illusions now, destroyed by greed and betrayal. Taking a deep breath, I tried to focus on the present. Toby bounded up, shaking water from his coat onto my jeans. I laughed softly, an unguarded sound I hadn't made in a long time. Maybe I can find a new normal, I told myself, letting the tension slip away momentarily. That evening, as I returned to the cabin, Frank's pickup was parked out front. He stood chatting with Rita. When I approached, he grinned. "James, we're grilling at my place tomorrow. A few folks from town, maybe some country music. You should come." My instinct was to decline, to hide from gatherings. But Toby yapped, tail wagging, almost like he was urging me to say yes. I glanced at Rita, who gave a small shrug. "Socializing ain't so bad. Don't have to talk about yourself if you don't want to." I hesitated, thinking how a small barbecue might evoke memories of that fateful day years ago when I'd first met Sophie. The parallels stung, but staying locked away forever wouldn't help me move forward. "Okay," I said quietly. "Thanks for inviting me." Frank slapped my shoulder, beaming. "Awesome. I'll text you directions. Bring Toby, everyone loves dogs." Watching him drive off, I felt a curious mix of apprehension and hope. Despite the ghosts haunting me, these people were slowly letting me in. If I dared let them see glimpses of who I was, a quiet, broken man searching for redemption, maybe I could mend a few of the cracks in my soul. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, Toby and I wandered back into the cabin. I rustled up a simple meal, heart pounding with the knowledge that, for the first time in a while, I was forging real connections. Slowly, brick by brick, I was building trust in a place that didn't know my past. And if I was careful, maybe it never would. The night before Frank's barbecue, I found myself restless in the cabin. Toby lay sprawled near the door, dozing, while I paced the small living area, replaying everything that led me here. Sophie's betrayal, Oliver's empire falling, the last-second flight that brought me to Crescent Plains. My new identity was holding up, but it still felt like a fragile mask. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a message, "Quinn." I froze, adrenaline rushing. Quinn rarely contacted me unless something important happened. Typing a quick passcode, I opened the message. Court updates. Oliver's lawyers attempted a motion to dismiss. It failed. Trial date set for a few months from now. Sophie remains in custody. Bail denied. She's blaming Oliver, apparently. Shared blame approach. Just an FYI. Q. I sank onto the edge of the bed. So the legal gears were turning. The revenge I'd orchestrated had left them both behind bars. Blaming each other? A bitter laugh escaped me. Two conspirators turning on each other, how fitting. And yet the knowledge twisted my gut, stirring up sorrow for the life I'd once cherished. Toby lifted his head, sensing my agitation. He patted over, resting his chin on my knee. I stroked his ears absently, gaze on the phone screen. Sophie remains in custody. Bail denied. Good. She wouldn't get to roam free after plotting my murder. Oliver was cornered too. That's what I wanted, right? My own voice echoed in my mind. They made their choice. They deserved this. Still, I couldn't deny the pang of old love, the sense of finality that weighed on me. Our story had ended in blood and betrayal, and now I was halfway across the country, masquerading under a new name. The ghost of Andrew Willard lingered, no matter how hard I tried to bury him. Swallowing, I typed a reply to Quinn. "Understood. Thanks for letting me know. I'm okay. Keep me posted." Then I powered off the phone, as if shutting out the world could also shut out the guilt. The next day dawned bright and clear, birds chirping outside the cabin window. Toby and I headed to Frank's ranch in the early afternoon. A handful of trucks and cars lined a grassy patch near a makeshift fire pit. Country music drifted through the air, and the smell of grilled meat made my stomach rumble. I approached with Toby, nerves fluttering. A small group of folks, maybe a dozen, milled around, chatting and sipping cold drinks. Frank spotted me, waving me over. "James, you made it!" He introduced me to a couple of neighbors. Wendy, a cheerful woman wearing a bandana, and Robert, an older gent with a weathered face and a friendly grin. Toby soon became the center of attention, wagging his tail at every pat on the head or offered treat. I tried to relax, letting the hum of casual conversation wash over me. They asked about my work around town. No one prodded about my past. Wendy joked about how we needed more strong backs to fix old fences. I laughed, a genuine sound that startled me. For a moment, I forgot the swirling chaos I'd left behind. Later, as dusk fell, a few more people arrived, including Kara from the diner. She brought a pan of baked beans, setting it on the table with a grin. "Hey, James," she called. "Haven't seen you in a bit. Busy with odd jobs?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just trying to get by." Toby sat at my feet, hoping for scraps. Kara handed him a small piece of leftover steak, earning a happy wag of his tail. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, the conversation grew softer, a few folks drifting off to stargaze or nurse second helpings of food. I stood near the fence line, Toby beside me, listening to the quiet hum of insects. Frank ambled over, hands in his pockets. He sighed, glancing at me with a curious expression. "You know, James, you never talk about your old life. Most people around here do a little bragging where they grew up, family, whatever. You keep it close to the vest." My pulse fluttered. Here it is the question. I swallowed, meeting his gaze. "Guess I'm not one for bragging," I said carefully. "Had some. Rough times. Needed a restart." Frank nodded, respectful. "We've all got ghosts, I reckon. You're welcome here as long as you like." Relief flickered. "Thanks," I murmured. "Means a lot." Late into the evening, after the others left, I lingered under the stars, Toby snoozing by a lawn chair. The glow of a small fire pit lit the area. Frank dozed in a camping chair, hat over his face. Wendy strummed a guitar softly, a lullaby for the farmland. Yet as peaceful as it felt, the echo of revenge still resonated in my mind. Oliver's trial date set, Sophie in jail, possibly turning on each other. I'd orchestrated that. I'd wanted them both to pay. My old self, Andrew Willard, a man trained to be ruthless when necessary, had done just that. But satisfaction remained elusive. Staring at the embers flickering in the fire pit, I wondered if the seeds of doubt I now felt were normal. Was it the right choice? Did I go too far? The alternative was my own death, so maybe not. But a quiet voice inside asked if there might have been a less destructive way. Guilt gnawed at me, overshadowing the freedom I was supposed to feel. Kara walked over, offering me a can of soda. "You look lost in thought, James," she said gently. "Something on your mind?" I forced a half-smile, cracking open the can. "Just the usual past regrets." My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. She nodded, not pressing further. "Past regrets got a way of following us around, huh?" Then she left me to my thoughts, drifting back to chat with someone else. I appreciated her not prying. Toby shifted, head on his paws, watching me with calm eyes. As the get-together wound down, I realized something. The revenge I'd pursued had consumed me for so long. Now, with Oliver and Sophie in custody, I was left holding the emotional debris. Perhaps that's the true nature of vengeance. It never ends cleanly, even when you win. The echoes remain. Before leaving, I helped Frank snuff out the fire. He patted my shoulder. "Good to see you enjoying yourself," he said. "Come by any time, man. Got plenty of fences that need fixin', he teased. I smiled faintly. Sure thing. Thanks for tonight. We loaded Toby into my truck, a second-hand pickup I'd managed to buy cheap, and headed back to the cabin. On the drive, headlights illuminated the winding road, and the sense of absolute darkness beyond the beams reminded me how alone I was. Toby's presence comforted me, but my mind kept circling the same question. How do I truly let go of the past? At the cabin, I checked the prepaid phone. Nothing new from Quinn. No urgent updates. Exhaling, I set it aside. Toby hopped out, tail wagging as we entered the cabin. I refilled his water dish, my own body heavy with exhaustion. Before bed, I stepped outside for a final breath of night air. The farmland lay silent, a mosaic of moonlit fields. Overhead, endless stars. On impulse, I made a quiet vow under those stars. I'll keep living, day by day, choosing to be more than the man shaped by betrayal. Maybe I'd never fully erase the pain, but I could try to forge something better in this new place. Toby brushed against my leg, a reminder that I wasn't as alone as I felt. Together we returned inside, shutting the door on the night. The cabin's dim lantern light flickered over my modest belongings. Tomorrow would bring more small jobs, more cautious steps into the community. And though the echo of revenge lingered, I clung to the hope that maybe, in Crescent Plains, I could find a life worth living, one not defined solely by the bitterness of what I'd lost. With that thought, I lay down on the rickety bed, Toby curling near my feet. My eyes slid shut. The hush of the farmland coaxed me toward rest. Even if the past never truly left, each sunrise might dull its sting, forging a path forward one slow, mysterious day at a time. The first I heard of the final court proceedings came through a late evening call from Quinn, his voice a hushed blend of relief and fatigue. "They're wrapping things up," he said. "Oliver's meltdown is complete, and Sophie's sentencing is about to hit the news." I sat at my small kitchen table, Toby at my feet. An uneasy swirl of emotions churned in my chest: anger, sadness, a strange sense of numbness. It's almost over, I told myself. The day I'd been anticipating but also dreading had arrived. One more pivot point in a life already riddled with turns. Quinn reminded me that I still had a choice: remain hidden here in Crescent Plains, letting the court handle my testimony via the avalanche of evidence I'd provided, or show up in person anonymously, or with my real identity, but that meant risking exposure. Toby let out a soft sigh, his warm muzzle resting on my shoe, as if sensing my inner conflict. I swallowed hard, recalling how close I'd come to losing my life. "No," I murmured into the phone. "I won't testify in person. They have enough proof. My presence would only complicate things." Quinn paused. "I understand," he said gently. "You sure? The prosecutor might want a direct statement from the victim, but the recordings, digital trails, and the hitmen's confessions are likely enough to seal it. Still, it's your call." A silent moment stretched between us. Outside, a faint wind rustled the cabin's eaves. "I'm sure," I finally said, shutting my eyes. I could almost picture Sophie in a courtroom, hands shackled, face drawn. She made her choice, and I'd made mine to survive and move on, away from the city's spotlight. Over the next few days, local news websites, the only ones I dared check, buzzed about Oliver's downfall, damning evidence of financial crimes, the recorded confessions about his murder-for-hire scheme. Then came the mention of Sophie the accomplice, who'd actively aided in planning her husband's death. One morning, I scrolled through headlines on my phone, Toby napping in a sunbeam across the floor. "Real estate scandal verdict. Oliver Spencer found guilty. Accomplice Sophie Willard faces separate sentencing," the bold text read. My throat went dry, seeing my old surname plastered on the screen. Willard, a name I no longer claimed. I avoided the more sensational sites. Even so, glimpses of the trial's drama seeped through. The stony expressions, the attempts at plea bargaining, the jury's grim reaction to the murder plot. I half expected a wave of triumph, but mostly, I felt spent. My revenge had reached its natural conclusion, and what lingered in me was exhaustion rather than celebration. Andrew's choice. A day later, Quinn called again. "The sentencing is set for tomorrow," he said. "Oliver's done for. Sophie's going to face the judge. She's been offering cooperation, but the prosecutors aren't budging on the murder-for-hire angle. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. So this is it then, I murmured. The end of the line. He sighed. Pretty much. The question is, do you want your name attached, or do you want to remain under your new identity? Let this fade. A pang of regret flickered. Part of me imagined stepping into that courtroom, looking Sophie in the eye. Would she beg for forgiveness? Would I feel pity? But the risk of exposure, the unraveling of my hard-won anonymity, loomed large. I'm done, I whispered. I won't be there. The evidence stands. Let them decide her fate without me. I'd avoided the live feeds, so I learned the outcome through Quinn's final call the next day. He described the judge's stern words, the harsh condemnation of Sophie's actions. I hardly breathed as he recounted the sentencing. 15 years, no chance of early parole for at least a decade. A swirl of conflicting emotion rushed through me. Relief, sadness, vindication, and heartbreak rolled into one messy knot. She tried to shift blame onto Oliver, Quinn said quietly, claiming she was coerced, but the recordings were too damning. The court didn't buy it. I bit my lip, eyes stinging. Toby whined at my side, sensing my turmoil. So that's it, I thought. Sophie was locked away. Oliver, too. The entire twisted web dismantled. My revenge was complete, and the final gavel had come down. When the call ended, I set my phone aside, staring at the cabin walls. This place had become my refuge, but now, with the legal closure, I felt adrift. No more threats, no more secrets. The bitterness in my mouth tasted like ash. Victory was never quite sweet. Days passed in a blur. I tried to cling to my routine, helping neighbors with small repairs, grabbing coffee at the diner, walking Toby along the farmland trails. But an itch of restlessness gnawed at me. Now that Oliver and Sophie were gone, what did I do next? The question kept me up at night. One crisp afternoon, while painting a porch for an elderly couple down the road, I got an unexpected message on the burner phone. "Where are you? We need to talk. Maria Chen, detective." My heart nearly stopped. Detective Maria Chen had been tangentially involved in the early investigation. I remembered hearing her name from Quinn, or seeing it on some leaked documents. How did she get my number? My pulse raced, Toby noticing my tension as I pocketed the phone. I debated ignoring it. My new identity was fragile. But something about her reaching out, after the trial's end, tugged at me. Maybe she had information, or maybe she was a final loose end. Over dinner that evening, I stared at the phone for a long time before texting back a single word. Where? We arranged a discreet meeting on the outskirts of a neighboring county near an abandoned rest stop. The next morning, I loaded Toby into my truck, driving out in the early dawn light. My heart pounded. Why was I risking this? I told myself I wanted closure, or maybe I needed to ensure there was no lingering threat. Arriving at the cracked parking lot, I spotted a single sedan with tinted windows. Toby let out a soft bark as I stepped out. A woman in plain clothes leaned against the vehicle, arms crossed. She was in her 40s, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. She sized me up. "Andrew Willard," she said quietly, using my real name. I stiffened, glancing around, but saw no backup. Toby pressed against my leg. "I'm James Nolan now," I said lamely, forcing calm. "Detective Chen, I presume?" She nodded. "I recognized your face from old case files, though not many. Quinn covered your tracks well." Her gaze flicked to Toby. "Cute dog." I didn't respond to that. Instead, I cut to the chase. "What do you want?" She exhaled, stepping away from the car. "Relax. I'm not here to arrest you. The case is closed. Oliver and Sophie are done. But I wanted to see for myself that you were alive, basically." A surge of mixed relief and paranoia flickered through me. "Well, here I am," I said, voice tight. "Why?" She studied my expression. "When I first heard about the murder plot, I had a gut feeling. The evidence pointed to you being the victim, but the official statements were murky, like you vanished. Everyone assumed you went into hiding." She paused. "I was curious if you were okay, or if you needed protection. Oliver had connections." I let out a humorless laugh. "Detective, the only connections Oliver had left are in jail. I'm not worried anymore." She nodded slowly. "Good. Then I'll keep this quick. Some of Oliver's associates are under investigation. If they find out you're still around, they might seek leverage or revenge. I wanted to warn you. My shoulders tensed. Toby let out a small whine. I can handle myself, I replied, the old CIA edge creeping into my voice. Chen raised her palms in surrender. I'm sure you can. I just needed to confirm you weren't in mortal danger, and I wanted to give you a heads up that if you ever choose to come forward about what happened, the department would likely support you. That's all. A moment of silence, the wind rustling the weeds around the deserted rest stop. Her words carried a strange kindness. Could I come forward? Resume my life openly? The notion felt both impossible and tempting, but I shook my head. I appreciate the concern, I said quietly, but I'm not returning to that life. She sighed, a hint of sadness in her eyes. All right. Here. She produced a card. My number. If anything changes or you sense trouble, call. Otherwise, be safe. I hesitated, then took the card, sliding it into my pocket. Thank you. With that, she stepped back, got into her sedan, and drove off, dust swirling in her wake. Toby nudged my knee as if asking what that was all about. I just ruffled his fur, exhaling. A ghost from my old life, I thought. One more door slightly ajar. On the drive home, my mind replayed the detective's words. She'd confirmed that Oliver's associates were still being rounded up, that some might harbor grudges. But I also sensed she genuinely cared whether I was safe. The world wasn't black and white. I realized some people in law enforcement might actually want to help, not just exploit or control me. Back at the cabin, Toby bounded out happily, and I leaned against the truck, heart pounding. Could I ever truly close the door on my past? Or was it always a phone call away, an unexpected visit from someone like Chen? I fetched water from the well, letting the repetitive motion calm my nerves. Each pull on the lever was a reminder that I'd chosen this simpler life. If ghosts from the city wanted to haunt me, I'd face them on my terms. But for now, I still had a choice to remain James Nolan, a quiet man with a dog and a handful of friends who knew little about me. That night, I stood on the porch, letting the stars overhead fill my vision. The meeting with Chen rattled me, but also offered a hint of acceptance. She wasn't demanding I come back, just giving me an option. For the first time, I felt the seed of a new path. Maybe one day I'd return to the city to finalize my story, put my own words on the record. Or maybe not. For now, Toby's loyal warmth and the hush of farmland was enough. In the weeks that followed Detective Chen's visit, I focused on rebuilding a quieter, more stable life. I woke at dawn, fed Toby, and often spent my mornings fixing fences or repairing roofs for folks around Crescent Plains. The manual labor, the straightforward demands of each job, soothed my restless mind. Yet sometimes, at dusk, I'd find myself gazing at Toby, remembering how everything nearly ended. How many times did Sophie watch me come home, planning my murder? The memory still stung, but each day the edge wore down, replaced by the steady rhythm of daily tasks. One overcast morning, I noticed Toby limping slightly on our walk. Concerned, I took him to a local vet, Dr. Helms, a woman with a calm smile and gentle hands. She examined Toby carefully, diagnosing a mild joint issue. He's getting older, she said softly, rubbing Toby's ears. Try some supplements, shorter walks. He'll be fine. Relief flooded me. The thought of losing Toby scared me more than I expected. After everything we'd been through, he was my one anchor. Thank you, I murmured, paying the bill. Dr. Helms smiled, praising how well Toby tolerated the exam, not asking any questions about my past. Another small mercy of Crescent Plains nobody pried. Over the next week, Toby improved, wagging his tail at mealtime and hobbling less. Watching him snooze in a sunny patch on the cabin floor, I felt a twinge of gratitude. No matter the betrayal I'd endured, Toby's loyalty stayed unbroken. At times, I recalled the story from the outline about me eventually visiting Toby's grave if he passed. But he was still here, breathing, tail wagging. So instead of an actual grave, I found myself reflecting on the concept of mortality. The idea that one day Toby would be gone, and I'd have to face that loss alone, chilled me. I vowed to savor every moment with him, no matter how mundane. One evening, I found a quiet spot behind the cabin where Toby liked to nap in the afternoon sun. I stood there imagining the future maybe years from now when I'd bury him beneath that tree. A lump formed in my throat. Loss is inevitable, I told myself. But for now, he was alive, and so was I. We had time. Around this period, I began noticing how some folks in town warmed to me. Kara from the diner would chat with me more often about local events, sometimes inviting me to join her and a few friends for a bonfire. Frank kept offering side gigs. Even Rita, my landlord, started dropping by with produce from her garden. The small gestures formed a tapestry of belonging I hadn't felt in ages. When I arrived at the diner one afternoon, Kara surprised me by sliding into the booth across from me. "Got a minute, James?" I raised an eyebrow. "Sure." She fidgeted, then blurted, "Some of us are going camping by the lakeshore next weekend. You and Toby should come. Just a night, nothing fancy. Campfire, fishing, that sort of thing." A reflexive tension seized me. Socializing? Sleeping outdoors with a group exposing myself? But I saw the genuine friendliness in her eyes. Toby curled under the booth, wagged his tail as if to say go for it. I managed a small nod. "We'll check it out, thanks." One day, while collecting supplies at the local hardware store, I spotted a stranger who made my heart skip. A lanky man in a black jacket scanning the aisles. Something about his stance reminded me of the mercenaries who once hunted me. I froze, Toby pressing against my leg, but the man just grabbed some nails and left, barely glancing my way. I exhaled, berating myself for paranoia. Not every stranger is a threat. Still, adrenaline pulsed through me. The scars of betrayal lingered, reminding me how swiftly a normal day could shatter. Partial closure. Amid this cautious routine, Quinn sent occasional texts. No new threats, Oliver's final appeals failing, Sophie's prison record quiet. In those messages, I sensed Quinn's own relief our plan had succeeded in a legal sense. The city had moved on, devouring a new scandal each day. Only I remained with the lasting weight of betrayal. I confronted my guilt on sleepless nights, turning it over in my mind. Was my retaliation too harsh? Should I have confronted Sophie earlier? Could we have avoided the bloodshed? The questions had no easy answers, but they lessened in urgency over time. My anger at her grew cold, replaced by a subdued sorrow that we'd lost what once felt real. As days flowed, I began teaching small self-defense tips to Frank's teenage nephew, who wanted to learn cool moves. I kept it basic just enough to instill confidence, and maybe it was my way of channeling old skills into something constructive rather than destructive. The kid beamed whenever he succeeded in a new hold, Toby wagging his tail in approval from the sidelines. Slowly, I recognized that each modest interaction helping fix a barn roof, sharing coffee with Kara, or just strolling with Toby among the farmland was forging a sense of peace. I wouldn't call it happiness, but it was something close to acceptance. Perhaps life could be lived in the present, unshackled from the worst shadows of the past. One late afternoon, I stood with Toby by a small pond, tossing a stick for him to fetch. His limp was minimal now. Watching him bound after the stick, panting happily, I realized I was smiling genuinely. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. No assassin lurked behind the trees, no phone buzzed with urgent news. For the first time, the quiet felt like a blessing rather than a cage. I crouched, petting Toby's damp fur when he returned with the stick. "We're okay, boy," I murmured. He slobbered the stick onto my shoe in response. A laugh escaped me, light and real, echoing across the water. A hush fell over Crescent Plains as dawn approached, painting the sky with the faintest brush of gray and lavender. I woke early, a subtle thrill coursing through me. Today marked a turning point, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Toby stretched, yawning with a gentle whine. We'd both slept surprisingly well. Over the past week, I'd quietly finished a few renovation touches on the cabin. Rita noticed, nodding approval at the new porch steps, the fresh coat of paint. She asked if I planned to stay longer. The question made me pause. The old me would have dodged any talk of permanence, but the new me found an unexpected sense of belonging here. "I might," I told her. "No reason to leave yet." And that was true. No more death threats, no more looming trial. The only question was whether I could let myself plant roots without fear. An investment in stability. Later that morning, I visited the local hardware store again, Toby trotting at my side. I purchased a small sign, blank, wooden, perfect for carving a name. I didn't know if I'd write James Nolan or something else, but I wanted a marker for this cabin, a declaration of presence. The store owner, a quiet man named Ed, watched me with curiosity but didn't pry. Outside, the sun rose higher, bathing the dirt road in a golden glow. Toby sniffed at a patch of wildflowers. My thoughts drifted to the image of a sunrise porch, my porch where I'd stand each morning, letting the light wash over me like a benediction. A new dawn, indeed. Teaching self-defense discreetly back at the cabin, I worked in a small clearing behind the property, setting up a makeshift training area. Inspired by teaching Frank's nephew, I figured a simple self-defense class might help local teenagers gain confidence. Or maybe it was just another way for me to channel old instincts into something constructive. That afternoon, a handful of curious kids showed up. Word had spread from Frank's nephew. Toby watched from the sidelines, tail thumping. I demonstrated basic stances, simple counters, repeating the mantras: protect your center, stay balanced, never escalate unless you must. Each move felt like a nod to my old life, but with a gentler purpose. When the lesson ended, the kids thanked me, chattering excitedly. One asked if I'd teach them how to disarm a weapon. My chest tightened. That's advanced, I said quietly. Let's stick to the basics for now. They nodded, eyes shining. Toby barked as though applauding their progress. As dusk neared, I found myself at the cabin's front porch, a small wood-carving kit in hand. The blank sign lay across my lap. Toby settled beside me, warm fur brushing my leg. The scent of pine resin filled the air. For a moment, I hesitated. Carving my name onto that sign felt symbolic, like staking a claim. Am I ready to truly lay down roots as James Nolan? Memories flickered. Sophie's smile when we first met, Oliver's smug confidence, the cold glint of a gun, Quinn's unwavering support. Then the hush of farmland, the breeze stirring Toby's fur. With a slow breath, I began carving letters, each stroke deliberate. I chose Nolan's Rest, combining my chosen name with a subtle nod to the peace I'd sought here. The act felt cathartic, as though I were chiseling away the last fragments of Andrew Willard, the man who'd lived with betrayal. By the time the letters took shape, the sky had darkened to a velvety cobalt. I ran my fingers over the grooves, exhaling shakily. It's ours, Toby, I whispered. A place to stand still. In the earliest glimmer of dawn, a faint pink touched the horizon. I rose from bed, Toby yawning as he trailed behind. Stepping onto the porch, I carried the newly carved sign. The air was crisp, laden with the scent of dew-kissed grass. With a hammer and a couple of nails, I fixed the sign near the porch steps. Nolan's Rest, it read. Something warm settled in my chest, an emotion close to contentment. I stood back, Toby beside me, watching the sun break free of the horizon. The golden light spread across the porch, illuminating my small, determined sign. I have a home, I realized. A space not haunted by bullet holes, not defined by fear. Just a cabin in Crescent Plains where I could start anew. In that quiet moment, I allowed myself to reflect. Betrayal had shattered the illusions of my old life. I'd waged a lonely war against Sophie and Oliver, forging a path of survival and retribution. Now the courts had sealed their fate, and the city had moved on. I bore the scars, some visible, many not, but I was still standing. Toby bumped my leg, tail wagging. I scratched behind his ears, tears prickling the corners of my eyes. Not tears of grief, but of something resembling solace. I thought of how I once vowed to see the sunrise in peace again. Now here it was, painting the world in gentle hues, promising another day with the dog who'd stuck by me through every dark turn. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt unburdened. This is the final line, I told myself. I'm free from Sophie's shadow, free from Oliver's menace. I choose who I am now. And in that choice, there was power and agency I'd almost forgotten I possessed. Leaving Toby at the porch for a moment, I stepped onto the gravel path leading away from the cabin. Morning birds sang in the trees. My heart thudded softly, a steady reminder of life's fragility and resilience. The memory of betrayal would never fully vanish, nor the scars of revenge, but I didn't have to be defined by them. I stood there, inhaling the crisp air as the sunrise washed over me. The feeling was akin to shedding an old, suffocating skin. Andrew Willard had seen too much blood and betrayal. In his place, I now embraced James Nolan, a man forging a future built on small kindnesses, daily responsibilities, and the unwavering love of a faithful dog. The wind brushed my hair, and a hint of a smile curved my lips. I closed my eyes, letting the new day's warmth envelop me. No matter how many ghosts still lurked in my memory, I was done living under their dominion. The door to the past was firmly shut, and ahead stretched the open horizon of second chances. Opening my eyes, I turned back to the porch where Toby waited, tail wagging in the gentle light. This was my life now, and I would cherish it, knowing full well how fragile and precious it truly was. One step forward at my own pace, arms open to whatever might come next.